Hello, I'm Rob Perez.
Grassroots coach Manisha Taylor.
Christian Carambeu.
Matt Hodgson, director of the 4-year plan.
I'm Rob Lusher.
Dave McLaughlin.
Andy Copeland from the Glennet Southern Amateur League.
Philip Wick, I'm CEO of 14.
Former chairman of Ibis FC.
Chairman of Alexandra Park FC.
And you're watching
Pitch Talk.
Pitch Talk.
the only place to get your Monday night footballing fix.
The pitch is where we eat.
The pitch is where we sleep.
And the pitch is where we talk. Make sure you join the revolution, the football revolution.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, Straight Shooting LJ, the G-Man and Jazzy Fizzle proudly bring to you another instalment of the interview series that goes into the deep, dark, seamy underbelly of football. Nah. I can't even use that line anymore. You know the drill. This is Pitch Talk Beats, the series that gets behind the people doing positive stuff in football. And you know what? I am proud to say that I am sitting next to a man who has played for a number of clubs, including Leyton Orient, Millwall, Chelsea, and Gillingham as well. He's even managed Leyton Orient as well. He's a man who unfortunately was made infamous by the documentary Orient Club for a Fiver. But talking to him, he's a stand-up guy. and you'll find that out tonight. But I'm sitting next to the man that was, and will forever be Mr. John Sittons.
I hope so. No aliases, pleased to meet you.
How's it going, John?
Yeah, good. Glad to be here. Nice to be here.
So how you doing, man? What have you been up to recently?
Same as what I've been for the last 10 years, really. Just reality kicked in. Round about the age of 37. Never wanted the feeling that I was experiencing ever again, which was... I felt ostracised, to be honest, after the Channel 4 documentary. I was made an outcast, really, treated like a leper. Struggling to get back into football, the only thing I'd known for 23 years, since the age of 14. I was in and around a professional environment, really. If I wanted to stretch credence a little further, I'd say since I was 12 at Arsenal. And I just didn't want that feeling ever again, so it was time to get my head down, study and get a real job. So I've been a licensed London cab driver for 10 and a half years now. And most days it's good. Most days it's good in the respect that, you get to meet people. You never know where the next job's going to take you, the variety. London's traffic has me thinking some days I might be in the wrong job because I can't stand sitting at red lights or in traffic. But you know how it goes. You just got to take the rough with the smooth. And I've got to be honest. On the whole, I enjoy it because the only person you got to please is the one in the back.
The beginning is the first chapter. Logical place to start, would you say?
Yeah. Unless you're going to buy me book, and in which case I think we're going to start back to front. But no, you crack on and start where you want. You start in the middle if you want.
Who is John Sitton? What does he stand for, and what makes you tick?
It depends whether we're talking about normal life or whether we're talking about football.
Let's take both individually.
Football, I think what got me through, what made me tick was I think I managed to get a living out of the game for quite a long time through sheer... I had quite a bit of ability. I was a competent player. The people at Chelsea, like Ken Shilato, said that I was very accomplished. So, no airs and graces and frills and fancy flicks, but I was accomplished. But by and large, I would think my appetite for the game, my determination, my will to win, and probably above all else, my pride, because I trained every day the way that I played on the Saturday, which didn't go down too well with some teammates when you're getting levered into them. But I mean, it's just the only way I knew how. I could only play and train one way. I couldn't. There's no way I didn't. Some players could do it. I played with players that could do it. They could probably coast through the week at maybe 50, 60%, and then on the Saturday flick a switch and you know, they'd be up there, you know. But I knew that I had to be on top of things all the time, and I basically trained the way I played. So that's what made me tick on the football side. On a personal level, it's only really, it depends whether you look at it in terms of being good luck or bad luck. But with what happened to me, you know, I took a step back after overcoming the initial quite severe trauma, really, in the respect that it meant everything to me. I wanted to be successful as a person, and I wanted to be successful at the club where I was obviously started in terms of the coaching and management side of it. But I took a step back, and I just took it as getting another opportunity to look at different things in life. I've always been, I don't know if it sounds a little bit sort of abstract or whatever, but I've always been interested in nature, animals, nature programs. I've always read a lot. I've always been very interested in history, all sorts of history, the good, the bad, and the very ugly. Got lifetime commitment to my wife of now. We've been together for something like 36, 37 years now. Married together since 76, married since 82. Had our ups and downs along the way, but private but firmly committed family man, you know. So in the end, it's just about getting a living. Always made sure that my kids have never gone short. You just want your kids to do well, you know. So but they're still like hopefully looking to get a break. They're working, but you know that's what makes me tick. Really, taking an interest in them, making sure. You know, you stay on top of things. I think me and my wife are old school people. I'm an old school English person. My wife's Mediterranean, Eastern Mediterranean. Her parents came over from Cyprus in 47 and 48 respectively. I think her mum came first in 47 when it was still a British colony. So basically everything revolves around the family unit, bringing your tales of woe and your troubles to the family dinner table and the odd wise crack and being together really. We've stayed on top of things that way. Just trying to make sure that the kids turn out good, turn out well.
No, that's good.
So that's basically that's what makes me tick. I used to have a lot of hobbies when I had more money, you know, or more spare time, more so than the money. I think when you play football, there was quite a bit attached to the sort of easy come, easy go state of things. But you know, you live your life. What can I say? I'd like to have in the bank what I've spent. But at the end of the day, I've had a life. I've led a life. Yeah. You know, I was into everything. So that's basically really that's what makes me tick as a person. What used to as a professional. I mean, coaching-wise, I was fanatical. I really was. I was into everything. I was into any book that I could pick up, just even if it was to take a line out of a biography or an autobiography. Different coaching manuals. Some you picked up, some you threw down. You know, different DVDs, videos. Used to watch all different shows. I remember trying to get words of wisdom from a thing called the Footballers' Football Show, which was one of the first things they ran on Sky. I used to love it. I thought it was a fantastic panel show. And they used to have like discussions on, you know, current topics, current affairs within the game. And just it was like who's who, you know. I think some of my favourite people in the game ever were on there. You know, like the likes of Malcolm Allison and George Best, Ray Wilkins. I remember I think they formed one panel in one night, and it was awesome. And I took little lines off of that. And I definitely fit the criteria. I remember Malcolm Allison saying, being asked for his definition of a great coach, and he said, I've always found that great coaches, he said, are great naggers. He said they're great naggers, and I thought, yeah, that's me. I'm always insisting on more. I'm always wanting more. I'm always on top. You know what I mean? And then George Best cut it down with one line. He said, in that case, my ex-missus must be one hell of a coach. So just when you think you grasp it, you know what I mean? Yeah. You get someone come along and, but that's what it's all about, you know. I didn't realise I was in and out. You know, football is such a social game, and you know, I've had the best of times and the worst of times. So, you know, you live your life, and it makes you the person you are. So that's what keeps me going, really.
You mentioned names such as George Best and Ray Wilkins among others, and our next question is: do you have any idols or role models that you look up to, whether it be in or out of football?
Not really. No. The only person I've really admired, two people, is my granddad, who was he was a great businessman. He worked his way up from nothing, and then the government stole it from us. But he was phenomenal, and he was a man amongst men. And the tales of what went on where we're from in North London originally, from years ago, they're like the tales are legendary. And the other one, I think the only other person, I mean, you know, you've got your own personal things, like my mum was a great human being, my mum, great person. My wife, unbelievable, the calmness but basically the polar opposite of me. The calmness, the dignity, the serenity, the measured thinking, and the unsurpassed powers of forgiveness. You know, it just makes me wonder, you know, what the fuck's she doing with me? But the other person I looked up to me most is my son, because of how much he had to overcome at school, because he was a bright kid, and for some reason it was all about dumbing down and like running with Herberts, and you know, he went through a tough time at school, so he showed the great, you know, mental strength and determination and mental toughness, and he's come through a lot, and he's still a lovely kid. It would have been easy for him to have been affected, you know what I mean? Sports people, I mean, it's like, you know, who's who. I've got, you know, documentaries I watch till in the summer. I'll probably get into bed at 6 in the morning, 7 in the morning. In the winter, probably 4 in the morning. I'm mad for DVDs and tough, honourable men like Joe Frazier, because I used to love boxing and anything to do with boxing and watching boxing, and this is where I first started to come up with things. You know, I was 28 when I first started to take my badges, you know, with regards to dipping into other sports.
Yeah.
So I'm going back a long time. I'm going back to 88 now, before it became a little bit more en vogue, you know what I mean? And a couple of people got mentioned in dispatches, like your McLarens, you know, with regards to dipping into other sports. But the first person to introduce me to it or sow the seed of an idea was the physio at Leyton Orient, Bill Songhurst. And, you know, I started to look at the plyometrics and the power and the quick feet drills that they had in American football, and then looking at, you know, the training that boxers did for their, you know, durability and upper body strength, and you could go on and on and on, do you know what I mean? But I started to hand-to-eye coordination and footwork of basketball players, you know, and changing direction. I mean, not that it did me any good. I mean, I was like a centre half, and you knew what you was going to get out of me day in, day out, week in, week out. I was very like a defensive-minded defender.
Yeah.
You know, which probably
it's kind of absent these days.
Yeah, it would have took me a lot further now.
I'm the same way as a left back. I'm going the same way. But
Yeah. Well, for many years now, you know, it's been paraphrased and requoted. But for many years, I've heard people say that it's a dying art, and you know, there's no disgrace in getting players to do what they're good at initially, and on top of that, polish their strengths. You know what I mean? And if it means staying out on the training field to make them even better defenders, and I'm all for it, because I think, you know, it's like I've said, I've gone on record as saying I think now it's less about coaching and more about managing egos and bank accounts, you know what I mean? But when you read the stories of things like in Italy, that someone went over there, just to go off at a tangent slightly, they was talking about watching of one of the Milan clubs, and they had every age group from under 8 or possibly under 9, 8-year-olds, all the way through to under 18. And they were teaching them how to defend corners. You know, it's like, I suppose, you know, being introduced to a second language as a baby. You know, it just becomes...
Yeah, you just like a sponge.
You're fluent, you're
yeah.
fluent, you know what I mean? And you're probably, like you said, you're probably at your most receptive when you're that age. And it's just, they do it, they drill them ad nauseum, and then like they come through as youth, a tough nut to crack, you know what I mean? I remember when he broke through in the 80s, Mike Tyson, because at Orient, when I was a player, we were mad for him. Joe Frazier, I remember watching a documentary, and I was a bit disappointed in Ali the way he spoke to him. Because what a lot of people don't know is two things. In terms of courage, he's probably one of the bravest boxers ever, because he fought for years with half blind in one eye, with a detached retina, but he couldn't declare it, otherwise he'd have been, stripped of his licence and he'd have been skinned. And the other thing is, when Ali was going through the thing with being called up and wouldn't go to the Vietnam War, he was skinned. So Joe Frazier knew, he made sure that he knew he had a friend.
Yeah.
And he used to meet and pass him a bit of reddies to pay the bills. And the way he got repaid was all the bile and the filth that he spoke to him when they fought. You know what I mean? Calling him names and all that, which I thought was wrong. That showed me far more, what you should all be about in terms of like being in bravery and in terms of being generous and honourable, looking after someone like he did. And unfortunately, that's the way he got paid back. But no, I mean, I've always loved me sport.
Our co-host, the G-Man, actually has the first video question.
And a question I like to ask everybody who features on this show is, what was your first pair of boots?
Great question, yeah. I love that question. I think they were called Johnny Rascals. They were like some... Actually, I remember the name. I remember my mum got them for me, and my dad said, I think they cost $1.99. Relum Jupiter. Then I progressed from Relum Jupiter to Adidas Penarol, and from Adidas Penarol to I got a pair of Pumas, and then I went back to Adidas. Yeah, but I remember. And hold on. Between the Relum Jupiter and the Adidas Penarol, I had a pair of Alan Ball boots. They were white. Madness. I mean, on that, absolute madness. And on the bottom, they had studs, but they were in a circle. So normally on a normal boot years ago, if you had studs, you had 2 in the heel, and then you had 4. For the ball of your feet and your toes, right? This was like 4 or 5 studs in a circle, supposedly to help you turn quicker. But it never did me any good.
How did you get into football, and did you play football in school?
Yeah. Just every spare minute. I mean, I might have mentioned it before on the YouTube thing. I mean, I was literally. There'd be a group of us in school. I went to Brettenham Road School in Edmonton, North London, and from the infants. Remember the first day, they said you could go to a box, and like when it was playtime, you could pick a toy. So you had all the little birds with we were getting bean bags and hoops. Yeah. And I just went like that ball. You know what I mean? And we just started. We picked 2 teams, and who know what you're doing? You don't know what you're doing. You're 6, whatever it is. Yeah. And then the junior school had a football team. Mr. Dix, the headmaster, he insisted on a football team, so that got us going. And I had a photo years ago with me down on one knee with a ball, and it was like what do you call it? Harlequins, with a different. That was the football shirt. Yeah. But except it weren't. It was a rugby shirt. It was like carrying a knapsack on your back. It was so heavy, heavy cotton thing. And then went from there. We played. This is one of the things, the points I'm making. We had a youth club. You understand? And this is where I think the kids have been let down and betrayed. I think, and I think they call it cost cutting, but then it's funny how like church halls, etc., are getting turned in. Some yuppie buys it and it gets converted into a block of apartments. You know what I mean? So, it's and the kids are left out on a limb. And I've always thought that you should capture their imagination, and everybody's good at something. You understand? So what you should do, capture their, and it might be like when I went, there was a cross section of you could do different things at the youth club, like in terms of sport. So we had a Sunday side, and then it just went from there. I got called to go to evening training sessions at the Arsenal, and then started secondary school, and it just started going ballistic.
Do you remember your first match?
No, I don't remember the first one. I know at Bretton we got a good hiding once, and I thought to myself that was a bit of a lesson. We got battered, and then but then what happens is, and it's always been the same. You get the ones that go, you know what I mean? They're like young men at 13. And then they get caught up. Do you know what I mean? And that's what happened. We got better and better, and even with the Sunday side, I remember us getting battered, and then you know, a few of them turned it in, but then slowly as we added to the group, we ended up we won everything in sight, and then representative honours, secondary school, and then you get your you go from school to district to county, the county to they moved the boundaries and whatever, and it became inner London. Then it was London, so I went like Enfield, Middlesex, London, inner London. And then I went to Loughborough University for the get-together of all the best kids in the country for England schoolboys, and I made the last 32 and got injured. I'd have got in the side. Or at least in the squad that they take away, because basically the best players were all from our manor, and there was like three out the back four for Middlesex had pro careers. It was me and Paul Miller, who had a great career at Tottenham. We were the co-centre backs for 3 years, under 13, under 14, under 15. And right back was Tony Gow, who had a good career at West Ham, Fulham, and Blackburn, who won the league championship. He won a premiership with Blackburn. And the other kid, I remember him even, Lev de Brand. He was a left back, and he was attached to, he was with West Ham at the time. Midfield was Jerry Murphy. Michael Howells, David Howells' brother, he was at QPR. He passed away, unfortunately. Paul Goddard up front. So he had a cracking career. So it was a good little side.
Was centre back your favourite position to play as a youngster?
Well, normally what they used to say years ago, because I started out all right, and they said, you know, he looks comfortable. It looks all right. He's, you know, putting his foot in and winning the headers and winning the tackles, and but they defined a good centre back years ago as a fouled centre forward. So yeah, I mean, I actually started off as a centre forward, and I think the athleticism side of things might have let me down. Over the period of my career, I had a couple of, you know, I had a good run, especially at Gillingham. I don't know what I was, whether I was eating Weetabix, what I was doing, but I was just training phenomenal. And I even covered in midfield for them. But I played right back. I had a sulk once at left back, which I wish I hadn't have done, but I should have just had a tear up with the manager, because in the end, like, you become, you know, a victim of your own versatility. If you're all round competent and you can play right back, centre half, left back, midfield,
you'll end up just getting put around and not specialising.
And this is why I like to see the kid get sorted out at Man United. Do you know what I mean? Because he's Jones. He's a two-star nap to go to Brazil for the simple reason because of his versatility.
I suppose Owen Hargreaves had the same thing under Sven-Goran Eriksson. It was everyone was like, why is he playing? But the versatility kind of worked. It kind of worked for him. And
so I got shifted around a little bit, particularly at Gillingham. But yeah, I probably no two ways about it. The majority of the time, I was a centre half.
Yeah. What team do you support? We always like to get this out of the way early.
I don't really. If I'm honest, I'm not bothered. I'm not that fanatic. I don't really. I don't dig the tribalism thing. I'm not really that much of it. I've always been a bit of a Johnny Lone Wolf. I'm not really that much of a fanatic. I like to keep a general overview and watch the way different teams play. I've always admired, like, you know, a little bit sort of East End, Larry Tanner ball players like West Ham. You know, I came through a good academy system years ago at Chelsea. You tend to keep an eye on the clubs of the results of the clubs that you've had something to do with, that you played for, And then if you like now, I used to play with Steve Bruce. So you look at how's he doing at Hull? How was he doing before that with Sunderland, Wigan, wherever? Crystal Palace, Sheffield United. Wayne Burnett, who I played with at Orient, he's manager at Dagenham and Redbridge. You keep an eye on his results to see how he's getting on. Kevin Nugent's number 2 at Russell Slade at Orient. You keep an eye on how he's getting on. You wish him well and hope they do well. And then, like I said, you know, I've always had my dad used to take me to the Arsenal as a kid. Always stood on the North Bank with him, the old North Bank. And then you basically, you support who you play for. So when I was at Chelsea, it was all about Chelsea. When I was at Millwall, I was gutted to leave there. Actually, me and my missus sat in the stand and, you know, sound a bit of a tart, but I actually cried when because I really felt wanted. I felt appreciated by the supporters. I felt wanted by the manager who'd resigned. I felt accepted by my teammates. I felt accepted by the supporters, and they knew that I was a type, as well as having a bit of ability, I'd roll my sleeves up and have a go. I was gutted to leave there, you know. So, but then you leave and you say, well, I've got to pay the bills. I just got married, or I was actually getting ready to get married because the summer we got married, I had my new teammates and my old teammates all at the wedding.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? So then it's all about the time at Gillingham. And then from there to Leyton Orient, you know, so it's a general overview of thing without being mental on one club and fanatic on, you know, on one club, I suppose. So many good sides down the ages. You love watching Man United play, then and now. You know, like, remember watching in black and white the '68 European Cup win, and Bestie taking it round the keeper. The Arsenal double side, 71. I was sitting there and my dad exploded, nearly hit his head on the chandelier when Charlie Jules scored. You know, little memories like that. Do you know what I mean? And like poignant moments that really say, you know what, I fancy a crack at it. I'm going to give it everything I've got. So, I don't know, managed to get a living out of it. But any team that plays the game the right way, or, you know, they've got like iconic players who, you look at your West Hams and that. I was a great admirer of Billy Bonds, great admirer of the way he played. And you look at like the Frank Lampard senior, they were like the core of the, you know, of the West Ham side really. And I know Brooking gets all the plaudits, you know, but like when you look at what a professional he was, Billy Bonds, and he just struck me. I don't know him from Adam, don't know the guys, I've never met him. See him from a distance once in the press lounge at Arsenal when he was working for Capital, but he just strikes me as being a very honourable, professional, down-to-earth, quiet sort of guy, and I admired him for that, you know. So, no one in particular, but I suppose one of my sayings is plant many bulbs. You know what I mean? But what happened was looking at it, it planted so many seeds with me, looking at all these different people and these different teams and these different players, and you know, so just like what you might call a general overview, then and now.
Sits the player is the next segment we're going to move on to. You've played for a few professional teams, including Chelsea, Gillingham, and Leyton Orient. How did you get into each side, and what were your experiences at each side?
Chelsea, I suppose it came about, originally I went there as a kid. I got a lot of representative honours, and it was a lovely feeling at the time. I couldn't think of the last club on my YouTube interview, but it was Colchester. There was 9 clubs after me, all vying for me. At the time, you had to sign schoolboy forms. I'll never forget. It was like
is that the YTS kind of thing?
No, that's the next one up. That was apprentice professional.
Okay.
What it was to say that you were attached to the club and no one else could touch it.
Okay.
It was like a double page, like A4, and I'll never forget. It was like blue. The form was blue, and it was 9 clubs. There was I'd been at Arsenal and I got Osgood Slatters, which is, I didn't know it until I worked for the FA, and you have to deliver modules on physiology and anatomy. But what it is, it's like, it's to do with a growth spurt. And between the ages of approximately 13 and 21 are when a young male adult, you know, or a young male reaches his full adult height. But it could go in, you know, in stages, and you have like growth spurts, and it can affect Basically, the way you run, it gives you pain. You can't get a full bend. It feels like someone's hit you with an hammer across the bottom of your knee. It feels like bruised, but you've had no impact.
Yeah.
Cut a long story short, Arsenal let me go. Just as I was coming up to the age of 13. Then, like, overnight, it disappeared, and I was like just shy of 6'1", and they wanted me back. And I remember the guy's name, the scout at the time, Ernie Collett, and then there was Chris Geeler at QPR, Dickie Walker at Tottenham, Eddie Heath at Chelsea. John Lyle made direct contact with me dad. I'm not sure, but it was in tandem with whoever was West Ham scout at the time, but I forget his name, which is a bit remiss of me. I got approached by Jim Smith, who was manager of Colchester, and he was introduced to my dad by my school teacher, John Ruan, who I was actually going to take on the staff at Leyton Orient. Great football man, great school teacher, and a lovely guy, all-round guy, and a solid man. And Malcolm Allison walked straight up to me, Dad, and he said, "We're buying up all the best kids in the country. We're concentrating on London and the South. Your kid comes into that category. We want him to sign for us. How much do you want?" We're thinking of giving him a few grand.
Oh my word.
Yeah. So, it went on even then. I got a booklet off of Aston Villa, and I got a booklet off of Man United, asking me to go up and look around, and they had a hostel where they put all the young players. I went and trained with a few of them, and the place, in terms of like the information that I felt I was getting, and the playing environment and the coaches, the place I felt most comfortable and enjoyed, and felt like it was helping me going, was Chelsea. So they offered me schoolboy forms. And then 2 years later, after a year and a bit, they start to make, they give you the vibe about whether you're going to be taken on as apprentice, which was then their version of YTS. And then I signed apprentice at 16, even though there was still a few offering around to see whether they were going to offer it to me or not, other clubs that is. And then by the time I was 17, I was in the reserves. So I went from being, because it was South East Counties Division 1, South East Counties Division 2. When you're a first year apprentice, you start in South East Counties Division 2. I had a few games in that, went straight from that to the youth team as they were phasing the second year apprentices out, who weren't going to be taken on pro. And then I did so well, and the fact that they'd trimmed the staff so much, I ended up playing in the reserves at 17. By the time I was 17 and a half, I was captain of the reserves under Frank Upton. But the problem was, the manager, they were changing well, actually, not a lot's changed. They were changing the manager like you change your socks, you know what I mean? And,
sounds like a revolving door now. We'll come into that later on.
So
actually.
Ken Shilletta had been my youth coach. They'd gone. I actually went there as a schoolboy. Dave Sexton was the manager. That's how long ago that was. And it went from him to Eddie McCready, who was different class, different gear, absolutely different gear, everything. Man motivator, coach, raconteur, character, larger than life. I would head that brick wall for him. You know what I mean? He was just, you wanted to play for him. And he got the club promoted, and I had a fallout over contract terms. So Eddie Mack, the way he was, I'm off. And then you had Ron Stewart as caretaker. So let's go for it. Dave Sexton, Eddie Mack, Ron Stewart caretaker. Ken Shilletta was promoted from being my youth coach to first team manager. Then whatever happened with him. It was never really clearly defined whether he was sacked or he resigned, but he just come on top. He bailed out, and then Ron Stewart caretaker again, then Danny Blanchflower, and then Jeff Hurst and Bobby Gould. So I had like 7 managers in 6 seasons, and I actually got in the first team at 18. Probably too soon for me. Ultimately, the way the game was going, either A, wouldn't have been big enough, or B, quick enough. Because as we moved through the late 70s into the early 80s, all the honey monsters came on the scene. Yeah. So you went from, good, like, solid, compact people like, like Norman Hunter, Tommy Smith, Ronnie Harris, David A, imposing, uncompromising defenders, very accomplished, to all of a sudden you went to 6'3", 6'4" only monsters, you know, and that became en vogue. So I dropped down. I dropped down from the first to the third division. George Petchy, the guy who discovered Laurie Cunningham, gave him his chance. He signed me for Millwall, and then within probably about a year, maybe 14 months, George resigned. He just couldn't take it anymore. He was having a few health problems, and a guy appeared from nowhere, Peter Anderson. When I say nowhere, actually, he appeared from Tampa. He'd been out in Florida plying his trade, and I think his relationship with the then Millwall chairman, who used to be something to do with the board at Leyton, and Mr. Apple, Lenny Apple, he allowed Anderson to take the job, and for some reason, no matter how hard I trained or how hard I played, he took an instant dislike to me, and surplus to requirements. And when you stack yourself up against certain players who are actually kept on now, you think, well, you know, it just come down to personal choice or personal dislike for me. So I went to Gillingham, played under Keith Peacock for 4 years. The first two were the best, because after the first two, the team started to get broken up, and I thought the status quo and the feel-good factor in the squad was spoiled a bit by some of the signings he made and some of the loan signings he made. And then Leyton Orient, Frank Clark, 85, I ended up going to Frank. I played with him for 6 years, 6 seasons, yeah. So not a bad little run, but yeah, I mean, I got into it just purely and simply from, I just think like wanting it, hard graft and wanting it, and I think that was probably evident in the way I played.
That's an interesting story. Just because of the not only the amount of clubs played for, but in terms of kind of enjoying different things at different clubs, it seems. So
yeah, I mean, I'll be honest with you. I didn't really. You're always in a room like with maybe 20 or more guys. You're not going to be their cup of tea, and there's quite a few of them who ain't going to be your cup of tea. Yeah. I'll give you, for instance, there was a couple of individuals at Orient, and I used to live for 3 o'clock on a Saturday, and my life revolved around that. Yeah. And they lived for basically opening time at the pub. You know what I mean? Just the worst professionals and the biggest liberty takers, Mickey takers you've ever seen in your life. And one of them actually confesses to get a living out of the game by lying about his age.
Oh my word!
Do you know what I mean? And he just wanted a crack at. He had a fantastic career as I think something to do with like an advertising agency. He was a graphic artist, and he was playing non-league, and he actually took a cut in money just to be a pro for a few years for the lifestyle. Yeah, you know, a couple of hours work a day, and then. But it was all like there was nothing being achieved there. It was all being treated like a bit of a jolly up. You know what I mean? And I couldn't get on with that.
Yeah, no, I
Probably
totally
out of all of
understand.
them, the best enjoyment I was as a kid at Chelsea, because you come through the ranks for like a minimum of 4 years with the same group of lads. You've got like from 14 up until 18. So from 14 to 16 you're together as schoolboys, and 16 to 18 you're together as apprentices. Then it starts to get broken up a little bit because not everyone's going to be signed pro. But by and large, it was the same nucleus of guys for like 4 years.
To get that camaraderie with everyone is kind of you've been together that long in that kind of close quarters. There's kind of no real choice in terms of getting on. It's like either you get on or you're at each other's throats.
And we did, you know, and I like to think we did anyway. Millwall, I was accepted straight away, or more or less. I have to say, a great set of lads there. The nucleus was formed by the FA Youth Cup winning side. Just before I got there, just great lads, and great on the field and off the field, you know what I mean? And probably along with that, I'd have to say Gillingham, the first 2 years at Gillingham, all men. Polite, courteous, helpful, good trainers, good characters, and they all wanted to play. So that was probably the best dressing room that I'd ever experienced. Full of what I call proper football people, like good men, but good men as well. Yeah. Do you know what I mean?
I was going to say we've actually got a question from one of the Pitch Talk family, from Russ Vernon via email. He says, "Hi John, out of Chelsea, Millwall, Gillingham, Leyton Orient, and Slough Town, which was the best club you played for and why? And also, who was the best player you've played with and against and why?"
I think I've answered the one with regards to, you know, your favourite times. You have good times at all. It's what you make it. So I lived for training and playing. I lived for football, and at the same time I was a watcher and a listener. So you know, every club had sort of pluses where it had to, because the facilities weren't great. It has to be said. Yeah. Some of them were borderline diabolical. You know, so what made it is the camaraderie and the feel-good factor in the dressing room and playing with good people. So at each club there was a few good lads. Majority-wise, I'd have to say that like Gillingham was a good setup. Best player I played with, it depends, because at different clubs there were different players with different strengths. So if you looked at somewhere like Chelsea, you had someone like David A, who was bought the year I signed schoolboy in 1974. He played for Scotland in the '74 World Cup, and he got man of the match he basically out-Braziled the Brazilians. It was unbelievable. He could play right back, centre half, left back, midfield. You know, you could probably stick him in goal and he'd do a job. Yeah. You know what I mean? He was just a phenomenal all-round good player, good athlete, and a great guy. Very helpful. He's one of the few that tried to help me as a kid. Ray Wilkins would be another one. You know, a good player from a good family with a good upbringing, and a credit to, you know, all the brothers were in their own way. You know what I mean? I had a few up and downers with Steve in the reserves as a teammate, but it was Graham, who was the eldest, there was Ray, there was Steve, and there was Dean, and all top draw fellas. You know what I mean? He not long after our thing, I mean, the writing was on the wall. The East Stand had run over budget. They had to sell it, and they sold it to Man United for 800 grand. And that was phenomenal.
Big in them days, yeah.
Yeah, it was 78, 79, phenomenal. Yeah.
Phenomenal. The first £1 million player didn't come till a few years later with Trevor Francis.
So he was just short of that. Do you know what I mean? So probably another year and a half later was like you say, the Francis £1 million to Forest. In terms of playing against, if you want a quick name plucked out here that everybody knows, you knew you had to be. I acquitted myself really well. Kenny Dalglish. We drew 0-0 at home to Liverpool, Stamford Bridge. 40-odd thousand crowd made me run a yard faster. But I'd been taught well was, you know, by your Ken Chilatos, your Eddie Max, your Dario Gradis. And what I found was I had to apply the appropriate habits that I'd been taught. And it was like, it was whoever was going to apply their playing habits and come out on top on the day.
Kind of winning personal battles, that kind of
thing. Yeah, but I mean, he was like, you know, he was very good at backing into you. You know what I mean? And getting his body in and rolling you. He would use your body weight against you. If he felt you come too tight, he'd be gone. He'd roll you and be gone. So then, you know, I'd apply what I was taught as a kid.
So the one that was you got to kind of step off 5 yards.
Well, you get low, get your hand out. So that buys you a yard straight away. But you get low, touch tight, and don't follow the body, you know, because he wiggle his hips. You know what I mean? You only react to the movement of the ball. Make sure you get in line with the ball. You know, as soon as you get down the side, it'd roll you and be gone. Do you know what I mean? So the biggest chasing I got was probably, I think he had a couple of caps for England. But the guy was perpetual motion. I just wanted to get hold of him by his hair and just another little short fella, Phil Boyer. He played for Southampton and phenomenal. And I got a chasing like you wouldn't believe.
So one thing I hate as a fullback, just like those little tricky wingers that are up and down. It's like, do you ever stop? I'm gonna have to clatter you just to keep up with you.
Yeah. Well, you can't. There's not much clattering goes on now. But in those days,
no matter how much I try.
In those days, I was actually warned about a certain individual before we ran up the tunnel to play Liverpool. I was told, he said, if you get if you're getting a thing with him, you know what I mean? If you get a 50-50 with him, watch yourself. Yeah, I mean, first full fixture was Bolton away, Frank Worthington. I mean, there was household names at the time. Every centre forward I come up against was an international. The first, I come on at half time at home to Coventry. I made my debut. Ian Wallace and Mick Ferguson, Scottish centre forwards. The next game away to Bolton, Frank Worthington. And the front three, Gowling, Watmore and Worthington. After that, Liverpool, Dalglish and David Johnson. After that, Norwich, Fashioner and Reeves. After that, who else would it have been? Just trying to think who else we played off the top of my head very quick. Arsenal, Stapleton and Sunderland. Arsenal again, Stapleton and McDonald. Just every name was like...
So you played against a ton of quality players.
Everyone was an international.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? So you just think... And when you consider, really, I didn't mature until I was about... I mean, I was 18 at the time. I was like a stick insect. I was like 12 stone 2, dripping wet. I got battered. And this is what probably led to me, coupled with I had too much mouth. I was part of the social scene. And when the problems you cause... start mounting up in the minus column and it exceeds what you got in the plus column, then there's only one outcome. So that's why I got released from Chelsea. But physically I didn't mature till I was about 24, 25.
I want to ask you a question about your early years, and you mentioned about being 20. A question from Corey Henry via email. If you were 20 again and had the chance to play under one of the current 20 Premiership managers / coaches, who would it be and why? So who would 20-year-old Sits really want to play under?
I think, you know what? You play where you end up. You play where you end up.
But who would you want?
Well, if you look at it in terms of, I think if you look at it in terms of someone like Wenger, he seems to run a discipline. There's a fine line, and somehow he's got it sorted most of the time. Bentner's let him down a couple of times, but he's got like a relaxed, but at the same time disciplined atmosphere. And what he does, he seems to drip feed the players. I don't know. I've never seen him coach. This is the impression I get. He seems to drip feed the players information while leaving them the majority of the time to make their own decisions. You know what I mean? So for that to happen, right, and for you to feel comfortable in that environment, I think it's got to be like a relaxed footballing atmosphere. Whereas others seem to be, you could quite easily mention names where they're probably more Arrow was a coach, a little bit more.
You kind of say authoritarian.
You've got these three coaching, these three ways of coaching, and one of them is the command way of coaching, which is probably what it's a slick session. Yeah. But it's like basically you're going in and say, right, what you should look to do is this, boom, and you coach it command wise. Then you've got like guided discovery and you've got question and answer, right? So you could probably work out yourself who's going to be in the command mode, your Allardyces, your Moises. Do you know what I mean? But I like the way he talks, Brendan Rodgers, because he comes across like he seems relaxed. Do you know what I mean? He seems relaxed. And even though he's placing demands on you, it seems to be in a... So, I don't know, I think like probably why he's had so much success with young players, Wenger.
Okay.
Yeah, I've gone all around the houses and I've come back to Wenger because I think there's I think maybe the story, there's some truth in the story with regards to him producing so many young players and bringing them on. Do you know what I mean? You might get one or two that you're lucky with, but he's done it on a consistent level for 20 odd years.
Speaking of, especially helping young players, did anyone help you during your career? And if they did, how much did they help you? And in what ways?
I tried to.
Who in particular tried to?
I still suffer from it now, really. I mean, I've got 3 kids. I've got my wife. I've got my 3 kids, and yet I don't think it's no coincidence that they all think that I'm the biggest kid, because I'm a bit headstrong and I'm a little bit, if I don't get my own way, my wife shakes her and she goes, your mother, like, spoilt you, like you, do you know what I mean? Because she did, my mum did spoil me, you know what I mean? And I think it made me into a certain type of person where I was a little bit mardy. I was a little bit, if I didn't get my own way, and I was always a bit headstrong, and I think there's quite a few people who, you know, they tried to help me, and then in the end, when they said, you know what, he's beyond help, or I'm not going to waste any more time on him, and I can understand it now.
Is that in football or kind of?
Yeah, in football, definitely in football, yeah. Because, you know, when I was about 18, I don't know, I was angry about something, but I don't know what I was angry about. You know what I mean? There was a lot going on in my personal life.
I suppose at that age, kind of formative years, you're kind of growing up.
There were certain aspects of my wife's family, they, you know, it was a mixed race marriage, and there were certain aspects of them, they wanted her to marry one of her own kind. There was like a few close relatives died in my family, and I was just, my head was spinning. I was coming from the other side of London. I had a car crash and ripped my car off, so I had to get public transport, and I was just like angry every day. Do you know what I mean? And I think like it gets to a stage where people say, you know what, I've spent enough time with him, I've spent enough time on him, I've said enough to him, and I can understand it because I got to the same stage with people myself, and it manifested itself, as you saw in that documentary, with like blue collar language, and because and if anything, their patience was a lot, you know, was a lot more than mine. Yeah,
well, we're definitely gonna come. We're definitely gonna come to that.
David O tried to help me. Ronnie Harris tried to help me. Dario Gradi tried to help me. Ken Shilato tried to help me. Eddie McCready tried to help me. And I think when I started to do a few things, I think Dario had left the club, Eddie Mack had left the club, Ken had left the club. The club was in turmoil, so the senior pros ran it. And I just think in the end I was left to my own devices. And I think the situation was I was given enough rope to hang myself, and that's what I did. But I can understand it.
Yeah. You know what, speaking, staying with you as a player, is it true you nearly signed for Crystal Palace?
Yeah.
Tell us a little about it. How did that come about?
Well, only as a kid. Malcolm Allison, what it was, I was never sure about the guy because one minute he was working for Fulham, Fred, I think it's Fred Ricketts his name was, and I think he started to get a few good kids for Fulham. So Palace, they thought they had this game plan, they had this 6-year plan where they were going to buy up all or get all the best kids in the country, or at least in the south of the country. And they had this 6-year plan from 14 to 20, where they were going to, which is probably among one of the most vital periods in your career, actually, where they were going to actually work very intensely on these young guys and turn them, or you know, they had the raw materials at their disposal, but they were going to help polish all the rough edges, polish up the strengths, work on the weaknesses, and within 5-6 years you'd be in the first team. And Arnie Warren was the chief scout, and they turned up at a Middlesex versus Berkshire game in a Mercedes, and as the Mercedes doors open, we was warming up. He gets out, Fred Ricketts gets out with Arnie Warren, and then out of the back seat, Malcolm Allison gets out and walks around the pitch, and we all went, like, everyone's like, oh, it's Malcolm Allison. He just, not a tinge of embarrassment, but he walked straight up to me dad, and who was standing with the Chelsea chief scout, Eddie Heath, and he said, Fred Ricketts, who already knew me dad, because he wanted me to go to Fulham, he said, Mr. Sitton, he goes, can I introduce you to Mr. Malcolm Allison and Arnie Warren? My dad said, yeah, I know who you are. He said, I've seen you on the telly. So he said, I've heard some good things about your son. He said, I want to sign him. He said, and this is the plan. He just went straight into this diatribe, you know, and boom, 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 boom. My dad's like, and he said, well, I'll have to ask me boy. And he said, well, we're going to give him a few grand, he said, just to smooth the deal. You know, help the deal go smooth, he said, and smooth things over, make sure he's got a few quid behind him. So my dad said, what do you call a few grand? He said, well, he said, we was thinking 3 grand. I mean, I know what people like Kenny Sansom got, I know what Jerry Murphy got, I know what Peter Nicholas got, Billy Gilbert got. But he says, you know, so I was maybe just a little bit shy of what they got, right? But he said, well, I was going to offer you 3, but now I've seen him play, we'll give you 4. You know what I mean? So my dad probably could have said, make it 5 and here come.
Yeah, yeah.
Do you know
yeah.
what I mean? So it was all a little bit of bullshit and a little bit of bartering and
Like the whole gamesmanship kind of thing. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So he just said, look, I'll ask me boy when we get back to you. And I said, Dad, I'm happy where I am. And he said, you sure? I said, yeah, I'm sure. I said, I'm happy at Chelsea. I like it there. I'm enjoying it there. And I think I can make progress there. You know, which more to the point is what it's all about.
Yeah, of course.
Although as a kid you're just living day to day, it don't really grip you until you come to the last few months of, am I going to be signed apprentice? Then when you're in your apprentice, am I going to be signed pro? And do you know what I mean? Even though you've been working day in, day out, and you every Saturday, and you know, at junior level it was like the FA Youth Cup and the Southern Junior Floodlit Cup. You just wanted to do well every game to make sure that you were going to get signed pro. And then obviously when you sign pro, you want to get in the first team. So basically everything that I've gone for in my life, really, has to be said, I've achieved it. Do you know what I mean? You know, I wanted to be a professional footballer, I accomplished that. I wanted to get in the first team, I accomplished that. I thought I should have been captain at every club I was at, and that happened eventually at Orient. Summer of '85 I walked in and I was straight in the first team and I was made captain straight away. I wanted to be a coach, I accomplished that. I wanted to be a manager, I accomplished that. Well, some would say mismanager, but I accomplished it. And then I wanted to be self-employed and I accomplished that. So, you know, I'm quite pleased with the way things have gone. You know what I mean? But that's what happened with the Palace thing.
Oh, okay.
So my dad made the call and he just said, look, I've spoke to him and he's happy.
That's cool stuff. One final question in this segment. Were there any pranksters at any of the clubs that you were at? Were there any kind of funny ribs played whilst you were there?
Yeah, I didn't really, if I'm honest.
And did you have any pranks played on you?
I didn't really have any played on me. It has to be said, I'd have to agree. You know, if the amateur self-psychoanalysis comes out, then I've always been. I've got a sense of the ridiculous. I've got a sense of the absurd, which probably explain why it is I used to like people like Tommy Cooper and the Pink Panther films with Peter Sellers. You know what I mean? I crack up. It drives my wife mad because she says, "What are you laughing at?" Do you know what I mean? But I've got an acute sense of the absurd, and I could laugh at ridiculous things. But the pranks normally went on between the pros when I was a kid. We was all about the business. You know, like so when you're an apprentice at Chelsea. We was very much all about the business, and that group that was quite an intense group all round. You know what I mean? We had like 2 Welsh youth internationals, Clive Penny and Yuri Jenkins. There was me. There was Mickey Nutton who ended up making it as a pro with me. So 2 out of the back 4 made it as a pro. The goalkeeper, the other 2 were let go. Then in midfield you had like Jimmy Clare, Russell Keane, Steve Wallington, Chris Sully. Out of them, Jimmy Clare had a year. Chris Sully went on to play for Blackburn. So we was all about the business, really. Up front, Gary Johnson, he went on to be a pro. But the older groups tend to be, you know, they could be a bit wild.
Did you see any of the pranks?
A lot of it was second-hand stories, which I won't go into because some of them are. You don't want to. You're doing it to protect the innocent.
Yeah. Okay.
So the innocent could be the people involved. It could be their spouses. It could be their offspring. You know what I mean? But to put it in a nutshell, I remember Ken Bates when he first came into the club. I'd been gone a few months, and he said, "What I've found," he said, "is the main problem at Chelsea." He said, "Which we're going to change. The whole culture needs to change." He said, "You had the great team, which it was, of the late 60s, or actually the mid-60s, Docherty's Diamonds they were known as, and all the way through to the early 70s. So, you know, your Benettis, your Harrises, your Osgoods, your Hudsons, all that little mob, Houseman, Baldwin, you know, I can rattle the names off now, but just to cut across to make the point, he said you had basically an era where you had a group of players who thought that the training and the games and the club were revolved around their social arrangements. Okay. Right. So, and then you had the next generation, he said, who were not as good as them, thought that they could do the same. Right. So I was part of the generation behind that. So all that rubbed off and got passed down.
Yeah.
And you know, people like Alan Hudson, this is what I've heard, he could drink all afternoon, into the evening, into the night, into the early hours the next morning. But he was not only a supreme player who wasn't used enough. I can give you a list as long as my arm of players who weren't used enough for England, right, because of the prejudice held against him by Don Revie, or one of them that was Don Revie was the one who held things against him. But he could come in the next morning and run everybody into the ground. They would do like doggies, and he'd just be out the blocks, bump, 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 bump. And then after 5, 6 sets, the sweat would be pumping out of him, and he'd just get to it. He'd win them, and he'd spit and wash his face, and he's ready to go again.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Just a freak of nature. I mean, the 2 age groups above me, Clive Walker was the same. You could see him, he'd be in the top 3, 7-mile runs around Richmond Park, but the night before he's had like 15 lagers. Just a freak of nature.
Yeah.
Me, if I had 15 lagers, I wouldn't be able to lift my head off the pillow for 3 days. And it's true. It's true. Which is because it's one of the things, like Bobby Gould said, you're a bad influence, and with this drinking and blah, 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 and he come into where we used to go every Friday, the Black Ball. And he nicked me in the Black Ball. He said, 3 o'clock, Jeff, the manager's office, Jeff Hurst. I said, what? Some blackcurrant and lemonade and a game of pool. We used to go there every Friday. Cottage pie, chips and beans. Blackcurrant lemonade, game of pool, right? He said, nah.
Sounds like a good night, to be honest.
Manager's office, you know what I mean? I said, well, I can't drink. I'm a couple of lagers, I'm all over the place.
Yeah.
But he was just, because I was trappy and, he thought it was a bad influence, so he wanted me off the scene. So he used the drink as an excuse. But if the truth be told, I've never had a great capacity for drink, but you got people who had unbelievable, but they were just like freaks of nature because they could just run all day as well. Yeah. You know what I mean?
Is there anything you change about your playing career? It's kind of a soul-searching question, but it's always kind of hindsight is 20/20. But
you can't, because for the simple reason, look, if the truth be told, I think, and I've mentioned it before, I think the pendulum swung too far the other way. In those days, all the power was with the clubs. Mm-hmm. The players had very little power, and they could make you or break you. And now, like I said, the pendulum is now too far the other way. I think the players have got too much power, or their agents, them and their agents.
Yeah.
If I could change anything, I wish I'd have been, when I was younger, I wish I'd have been more as single-minded as I was in the second half of my career. That's the only thing I'd change, because I was, believe it or not, I was probably easily led. And I ain't going to go into who was responsible, but I was too easily led. I wanted to be one of the chaps. I wanted to be one of the lads. And if I could have been as single-minded in the first half of my career as I was in I might have been at Chelsea a little bit longer. Do you know what I mean? But then again, like I said, I've cited the reasons why maybe I wouldn't have been. Everyone was like your John Lacey's, your Willie Youngs, your Mickey Droys, your O'Learys. I mean, O'Leary had pace as well. But your Lawrence's, your Answers, everyone was like either 6'2" or they could run like the wind. And if you could do both, you played with Liverpool. Do you know what I mean? It's true, they were flying machines as well. They were quick boys as well. And O'Leary was quick, he was no slouch. But the game started to move towards, so I fell between the two stools. Do you know what I mean? Because I wasn't like one of the 6'3" only monsters, and I wasn't rapid. Rapid, quick. But no, in answer to your question, really, you're in that. They say that you're. Brian Easter used to say, you're in charge of your own career. You're your own advert. But I come across people who, don't matter what I did. The second two, I had 4 years at Gillingham. The first 2 years were better than the second 2 years. The second 2 years, I wasn't a different human being, and I wasn't a different player. But Keith Peacock makes some absurd signings in all parts of the field. But two of them just happened to be one guy was a centre half, one was a right back. The two positions I played. The right back was a short-sighted guy with a knee problem, and the centre half made me look like Linford Christie. Do you know what I mean? So you think to yourself, well, what have I done wrong to be in your bad books? right? Then you look at Millwall. George Petchey signed me. He loved me. The supporters loved me. I got on with all the players. There was great camaraderie. There was a great team spirit. And then along came Peter Anderson. Just did, you know. So you can't really change what goes on if it's in other people's hands. You know, you can only do what you do, which is what I did. I trained hard every day, and I played hard every Saturday. And I could probably count on, we wouldn't get to me toes, the number of chasings I got. Yeah. The unfortunate thing about them was, when I played in the first team at Chelsea, I was 50-50. 50% I acquitted myself really well for a not very fit, skinny 18-year-old kid. And I got by on nous and a little bit of ability. And the other 50% I got massacred. So that's not a good enough return for you to be staying in the top flight. And then as you come down the leagues, you could count on two hands, maybe even one, the number of chasings I got. Yeah. Out of 400 and odd games, that ain't a bad percentage.
No, not at all. Do
you know what I mean? So the only one to change, move the goalposts, pardon the pun, would have been the managers. Because sometimes they just freshen it up for the sake of freshening it up. You know what I mean? But it's in the eye of the beholder. Do you know what I mean? At the end of the day, they do what they want to do. You can't change who you are. You can't change you, and why should you?
Sits the coach and manager. That's where we're going next.
Okay.
We've read that you had a spell after managing Orient, which we're going to come to your time at Orient. Yeah. But we've read that you had a spell as an assistant manager at Enfield and 2 spells at Leyton FC. Yeah. How did they go, and how did you get into those roles?
The Enfield one came about as a consequence of somebody getting recommended for the job. And then he spoke to the then chairman, a certain Tony Lazarou, his name is, and he said to me, he just rang me. He said, "I've got the job. I want to come round and have a chat with you." So he come round and had a chat, and he said, "How do you feel about coming and doing a bit of coaching?" So he said, like, you know, you get a bit of wages out of it. Truth be told, at the time I was on my knees financially. And just stumbling from one day to the next. And it was a bit of chink of light at the end of the tunnel for me, you know what I mean? Long sort of tunnel of depression, really. Just so I couldn't even get up and make a cup of tea, to be honest. Anyway, I took it, and within a couple of chats with a guy, had it pegged, because what he'd done, he'd sold them in the stadium and the grounds, a lot of acreage, the old Enfield, and always one of the big non-league sides. And he sold the whole site to the local council, and there's a multiplex cinema, a swimming pool, a sports centre, a steakhouse, a pizza place and a Chinese on it, and car parks for all of them. So shows you the size of the site.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah.
And I said, like, you know, what he's going to do now, he's got his readies off. You know, we was training on AstroTurf. We were renting Boreham Wood for our main, for our own fixtures. And I just said, listen, he's not doing anything about relocating. I said, I fancy he's going to fade into the background, just ride off into the sunset with his bag of readies. Unfortunately, I got proved right. Then the same guy moved on to Leyton, and then I went down there. And I don't think we made it to Christmas. Just the guy was, the chairman was always on the manager's back. So I did the honourable thing and went with him, really. I stayed to tide him over for a couple of games, and I just said, no, I won't be your thing. You know, leapfrogging the manager who brought me here. I thought it was right and time to show, you know, a bit of decency and a bit of loyalty. And then a couple of years down the line, I think that in the interim period, they'd appointed a certain Peter Shreves, ex-Tottenham Chelsea custodian, and they had a really poor season or two. And the chairman called an emergency meeting with all the players, and this was how it was worded to me by certain players and by the chairman himself. because he rang me out and he said, oh, I want to take you out to lunch. He said, I've got a proposition for you. I said, what's that? So I said, because we didn't part on the best of terms. And he said, well, I've sat the players down. He said, not to put too fine a point on it. He said, we're going backwards. He said, how are we going to take the thing forward so that we don't have another year like we had last year? So any observations, anyone want to give their thoughts? And a couple of players put their hand up and they said, which was nice, they said, the most organised we've ever been, the most improved we've ever been, the most informed we've ever been, and the most enjoyable it's ever been was under John Sitton. We want you to get him back, which was fantastic for me.
That's a great gesture, yeah.
Like in terms of your pride, your ego.
Yeah, it's a nice endorsement.
It was a lovely endorsement, and then so we did pre-season, and the season started, and we played 4 games. We won 3, we drew 1. So out of a possible 12 points, we had 10. We were second in the league. I think we scored something like 12, conceded 2 or 3. I got a call to one side on the Thursday night. I want a word, and I used to say, used to call him chairman sometimes call him by his first name. He weren't fussed. And he said, I said, what's the problem? He said, I'm not happy with the way we're playing. So I rattled those statistics off, and I said, well, that begs the question, who's sort of been chewing your ear off, you know what I mean? Bad mouthing me or the thing, and I said, someone sowed some seeds. He said, no, he said, I'll make my own mind up. I said, well, if you made your own mind up, then I've got to ask you this question. He went, what? I said, how would you be if we lost 2 or 3 on the spin? So I said, I think it's got to be a case of thanks, but no thanks. He went, what do you mean? I said, Saturday's going to be my last game. And that was it. And I've never been anywhere since.
You know what? I want to ask you, staying with that thing, with that issue you brought up about the chairman. We're going to jump ahead to a few questions. What do you think about certain owners and chairmen, such as, say, Roman Abramovich, for instance, who seem to kind of throw money at their clubs, but they also seem to be heavily involved in transfers, like the Torres one being a perfect example of that. Do you think that undermines a manager or a head coach's position?
Yeah, there's no 2 ways about it. I mean, listen, football, let me tell you this, I'm going to state this quite categorically, right? And I couldn't mean this anymore. Football is full of prostitutes and whores. They sell their manhood and they sell their soul, and they allow themselves to be undermined, right? Because they either A, haven't got any real confidence in their ability, right? And they're not the great I am, they're not the great mister that they think they are, the don that they think they are. And 2, right, they do it for the sake of fair enough, you know what I mean? It's prostitution by deferred payment. It's probably the most expensive type of prostitution in existence in the world today. When you're looking at 40, 60 grand a year, £2-3 million salaries, £4 million salaries, they allow themselves to be undermined. They allow themselves to be pushed around for the sake of the salary and a great what you might call lifestyle and living accommodation, whether it's here or whether it's abroad eventually. You know what I mean? And they retire on a big fat wallet and a big fat pension. I couldn't live like it. But who's the mug? Do you know what I mean? I'm the one doing a 60-hour week in the cab, not them. Yeah. You know what I mean? But it's automatically assumed that I happen to think there's you've got the black issue and you've also got the Cockney issue.
In what way? That's quite an interesting turn of phrase.
Well, you've got I think the same way as they say there's not enough black coaches and managers in the game. There's not enough Cockneys either. Because someone from Govan Shipyard, someone from the Goulballs like Graham or McClintock, someone like Allardyce from the streets of Bolton, someone like Moyes from Glasgow, wherever he was from. You know what I mean? You're talking about like working class, ethnic's the wrong word. What's the word I'm looking for? But you're talking about working class
minorities, was it?
like dialects. There's a word anyway to do with an area. But anyway, it might come to me. Probably come to me when
also kind of regional dialects.
Regional.
Yeah.
So why should it be any different? But they're not. But when you sound off like a Londoner, you know what I mean. Like me, I sound like I could be running a flower store outside Waterloo Station. But what's in here is no less than what they've accumulated over the years. And we can all go to coaches' seminars and, we can all attend Lilleshall, we can all upgrade our qualifications and we can all stay on top of the next big thing, you know what I mean? And, which is the way football is, do you know what I mean? But I think because you've got a rough, gruff Cockney voice, you automatically assume that you're a Barra boy. Do you know what I mean?
How did you get into training coaches at Lilleshall with the FA Coaching Education Scheme? And who did you work with during your time at the now defunct FA School of Excellence?
I never ever coached coaches at Lilleshall. What I did was so as you took a qualification, I actually coached the one underneath.
Okay.
So when I took my prelim, all the courses are FA courses, but then the FA is split into what you might call subsidiaries of area FAs. Regional FAs is the right word, regional FAs.
Oh, so kind of like the counties and that kind of thing.
So you had the Surrey FA, the Sussex FA, the Hertfordshire FA. I came under the London FA. So the thing they brought out initially was it weren't all that. It was a soccer star scheme. When I took my prelim, I was staffing the soccer star. When I did my full badge, I was staffing the prelim. So then that was in 1990. From 1990 onwards, I was staffing prelim courses, and then I actually I was in the inaugural group in 1997 that converted to the UEFA A. So I was then staffing what is comparable to the UEFA B. And I think they've changed it again because what happened was with the UEFA A, there was I think there was one up like a pro diploma course by some closed shop invitation. I don't know, people like Oddle or whoever, which I think isn't fair. Keeps it elitist. But if the truth be told, it's more or less the same stuff regurgitated. And it's worded slightly different. In the 97 conversion, I think there was only a few specimen sessions. You weren't asked to take any sessions because you already had your full badge and assumed that you were a competent coach. And they did brainstorming sessions and role playing, and they did a couple of little things on like plyometrics and ballistic stretching, and that was it. So I staffed loads of courses for the FA, but via the LFA.
So that's how you got
the only time I ever went to Lilleshall was for my own my own ends.
A question from our co-host, the G-Man. What do you view as the best qualities to be a successful manager?
I think management is totally different from coaching. I think I'm more of a coach than a manager, and I think management is mastering the art. Again, I was just driving around in the cab and I thought, what's it about? And I said, well, when it comes down to it, if we're going to put it in plain, simple, un-PC terms, it's about using people and mastering the art of usury. And there's a bit of kidology involved and a little bit, whereas I'm a little bit more boom. This is tried and tested, this is how it needs to be done, this is the run you need to make, this is the angle you need to make it at, this is the contact you need to make on the ball, etc., etc. It's, you know what I mean? Whereas the art of usury and kidology I'm not very good at. I can tell someone well done when they've applied themselves and pulled off a great technique. And I've stood there many a time and applauded a player on the training field. But I don't really, I would never then or now envisage myself getting into people's lives, worrying about their life. I mean, they're men. No one. After I lost my mum and then my dad, I mean, I've been on my own since I was a kid. You know what I mean? No one looks at, so you are what you are, and you're dealing with grown men. I don't think it should be. I don't think the accent or the demand should be placed on a manager whereby he's got to take a personal interest in every player's life to show that he cares and that he can kid them along. And coaching wise. I think your main asset is knowledge of the subject matter. So that gives everybody a chance. From the guy around the corner in the football cages, he could be as good a coach as Terry Venables, but we'll never know. You must have knowledge of the subject matter. The next most important thing I think is, which was said to me, and something that maybe came into play, credibility. For me, the biggest asset a coach can possess, thinking of it on my own and what the type of coach I was and I'd like to be, is imagination.
Is that just in terms of sessions or just everything? Just
everything.
Capturing the players.
Capturing the players, the sessions you put on, and also the systems you play. But not just the systems you play, being able to talk about the systems and coach the systems.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? A lot of it now is just like, you see, I've seen when they throw the disc down to explain to their group how the opposition's going to line up, right?
Yeah.
And they put the disc in the formation of the opposition that they're going to come up against on Saturday. I'll promise you this, it might as well be their own side. Because what they do, they just put in really good players in those positions. You know, at the moment the thing in vogue is like whatever it is, 4-2-3-1 or and they're throwing them down, and I'll be shocked if there's a great deal of work going on in terms of stop-start coaching, because it depends on the upbringing. But I suspect that where the players are concerned, they take it as a personal slight on their ego. You know what I mean? So I don't know. I suppose it depends how you word it, but yeah, that's what I'd say. I'd say knowledge of the subject matter, which I thought I had, or think I've got. Credibility. Someone's always going to listen to Glenn Hoddle rather than listen to me. Someone might prefer to listen to me than someone over the park. So there's like a pecking order all the way from the top to the bottom. You can't help that. That's why I bring in knowledge of the subject matter, because it gives everyone a chance. Then I think it's about imagination. For me, that's one of the biggest assets a coach should have.
No, that's good stuff, man. I mean, from Samir Sawney via Facebook, actually our last Pitch Talk Meets guest. What are your views on players being promoted directly into coaching roles? Should they not have to earn their stripes as they did as players? Me, I'd be against it. I think it's combined what you might call PR exercises, combined with reward for service, combined with continuity. Never in a million years is Gary Neville going to be anywhere near coaching England players. England player, good servant to Man United and England, but if that was the case, then I suspect who got the chasing. The right back was getting a chasing for one of the qualification games. I thought, well, you know, if Gary Neville was there, that's his position. He should have dealt with it like that. He should have seen it and gone in and say, do this, watch out for that, and open your body. It's Chris Smalling, wasn't it? I think it was Chris Smalling.
It should have been dealt with. He should have sussed it within a couple of times of it happening to make sure, Chris, it don't happen again. This is what you need to do. So he ain't going to be drilling the back four. So why is he there? And the same at Man United, Phil Neville and Ryan Giggs. They've got all the credibility in the world, and it's for services rendered as a Man United player, Giggs, and his playing record and his credibility is ballistic. It's into space. But I don't see him, taking an organisational thing, because you're going to be talking to players how they're going to keep a straight face, because they know the Ryan Giggs, the player. So I think sometimes it's better to do it, get you and work your way up, and maybe go away and then come back. With a different set, with different group of players. Because I'll give you for instance, it's a little bit. It's an ingredient. Right? Not me. I was happy to be called John. I was happy to be called Sits. If they wanted to call me anything else, make sure I don't hear it. But Chris Turner says we should be called Boss. Right? So I said, no. I said, Chris, no. I said, He said, well, it's a sign of respect. I said, listen, I'll earn their respect, we'll earn their respect by, the way I coach them.
Yeah, not by name.
Not by name.
Names, yeah.
And I said, if you're going to insist, maybe the YTS lad should call us boss, right? But I'd already had the YTS. I left the youth team. So now I've gone from John or Sits to boss. And I just used to wink at them, right? Because I just thought, I don't need this from you. You know what I mean? You know what I'm all about. I know what you're all about, But then the other extreme was a player who I played with, Danny Carter. We used to bump into each other in the corridor in the morning. I'd be going to the referee's room at the main ground, which was the staff changing room, to get a kit on. And Danny Carter used to go, all right, John boy, you know what I mean? So it's gone from one extreme to the other. Do you understand what I'm trying to say?
Yeah.
So there's got to be some. So maybe it's best for players who aspire to be coaches or managers to go away from their home environment and then maybe come back with a different, work with a different group who don't know them.
That's a good chat. That's actually quite interesting. You say about going away. We've kind of had some discussions along those lines in terms of English coaches and players getting kind of opportunities here. Yeah. Sometimes it might need to kind of go away or abroad as it were, to kind of earn your stripes out there and then come back with credibility.
Yeah, and not just that. You broaden your canvas. Do you know what I mean? You're broadening your horizons. You're broadening your knowledge of. You're working from a broader base of knowledge and different things, different regimes, different countries come up with different. I was listening to the thing tonight about the Germans and all this 8-9 second thing that Rossler's brought in at Brentford. Which he got from Klinsmann when he was with the Germans as the national team manager. I'm not sure how you can, because I've read this thing now and I thought, well, no, football don't work like that. Because I read a thing yesterday about the Barcelona pressing game. No one, and he'd had it on a thing. An opposition defender wasn't allowed to have more than 3 seconds on the ball without having someone in his face. Yeah. Well, I'm not sure how that works, because I could take that to an extreme. And then the guy today on TalkSport he was talking about the thing that he learned from Klinsmann with regards to the counter-attacking method, where they wanted to be in the opposition's penalty area within 9 seconds. Yeah, you know what I mean.
Which is difficult at best of times.
Like I'm not sure it works like that. Yeah. Do you know what I mean?
Orient Club for a fiver. It's been the white elephant in the room, but shall we dive in?
Listen,
we've got a lot of questions.
Yeah, I've got no problem with it. You ask away. I mean, obviously it cost me the prospect of any future career, and there's a lot of stuff that's significantly embarrassing, and. But then I'm a big enough person to hold my hands up and say, you know what, guilty as charged, now what? Do you know what I mean? It's not an hanging offence. Things were done to me. Yeah. I've done a couple of things that were perceived as unfair to other people. I felt in the end, I was having games being played with my life, with my livelihood, and you can't go through squeaking like a mouse. You can't go through life like that. I wasn't going to have it.
Do you know, it's interesting you say that, because the first question is, some say you were poorly portrayed in Orient Club for a fiver, and I'd be one of them ones who would say you were poorly portrayed. And some will have misread you because of the documentary. How do you feel you were portrayed by the Channel 4 documentary Orient Club for a fiver?
Well, I agree it was unfair, but only from the point of view or from the perspective that it was unbalanced, because probably I might have mentioned to you earlier, maybe there was 2 or 3 things that I was guilty of being very naive about, and this was one of them, that journalism is more or less based on sensationalism. So look, I still attended the Centre of Excellence on a Monday and a Thursday night to watch the kids from 9 years up to 15. I took a personal interest in all the coaches who I appointed. I made sure those coaches all got the proper recommended prerequisite salary for a full-time coach, for a full badge coach. Whereas before, like me, I was getting a tenner a session and that was 2 1-hour sessions, right? And I was getting a tenner in the drip in the rain, the pee in the rain, or the freezing cold to try and work my way up the ladder. And I thought, no, I'm not going to treat coaches like this. I'm not going to treat people like this and take their services for granted and take them for granted. So me attending the Centre of Excellence on a Monday and a Thursday is not good TV. Me drilling the back 4, or if you include the keeper, the back 5, or if you include the 2 central midfield players, the back 7, which we used to do drills, you know, where we'd have like 10 against 7.
Yeah.
That's not good TV, because it's like it's stop-start coaching. It can be monotonous. You should do it ad nauseum anyway until they're sick of it, but it becomes second nature. That's not good TV. Me going scouting games, although I still can't work out why I was doing it, other than to try and be like the next sort of Harry Redknapp, where I was at every game, watching every player and every football match, you know what I mean? Because we had a transfer embargo from the end of August 94 through to the following February, March 95.
That was because of you being in administration, wasn't it?
Yeah, well, yeah, borderline. It was administration, borderline liquidation.
Yeah.
We're also having the salaries paid by the PFA. So why was I scouting? But the fact that that wouldn't make good TV. Me sitting at the time, Wimbledon was still using Plough Lane for their reserve games. Me sitting at Charlton or at Plough Lane watching Wimbledon reserves is not good TV. They caught me on camera once acting as commercial manager, which was one of the 6 jobs that I was doing at the club. Yeah. But again, not really good TV. But I'm going to be 100% candid, 100% honest. I didn't throw well dones in for the sake of it, because in the end, players will see through that, right? And I just think, and it don't really mean anything anymore. Do you know what I mean? Even the well dones, if you just keep saying well done, it don't mean anything anymore. Yeah. What I will say is, from when I took over through the rest of the 93-94 through that pre-season into the early part of the season when I came in full-time, or supposedly full-time, I praised players when I felt they deserved it. You know, there was plenty of like well dones and good boy and good stuff, and that's nice. And I exploded about 4 times. And out of the 4, it was on camera for 3 of them.
Oh,
so that was I think it was Brentford. I think
there was Brentford,
Boxing Day.
Blackpool was one, wasn't
and
it?
Terry Howard got the sack, and
I'll ask you about
and one other.
Yeah.
And one other.
Yeah.
So 3 or 4 during the course of nearly a year. I don't think it's the end of the world.
Yeah. No, not at all. Sometimes players do need that kick up the backside. And
what you had a nightmare scenario where you had quite a few players who really and truly, and I've just read 2 autobiographies. I've actually got a little bit left of Ferguson's, right? But in Harry Redknapp, he's talking about bumping into people, when he was out of the game. And he was talking to Joe Roll, and he said about not going back into it. And he said, why? And he said, not to put too fine a point on it, he said, Harry, I couldn't take it anymore. I couldn't stand it. He said, players don't give a fuck anymore, right? And when you've got senior pros with that attitude, and you've got professionals with that attitude, then I had the same problem that probably latter day someone like Roy Keane had, although he's on a much higher plane than I ever was, and much better player and much higher profile. But one of the problems you've got is being able to deal with disappointment and failure, right? Now, what I would wrap that inside of how players conduct themselves Monday to Friday, and then in a game on a Saturday. You understand?
Yeah.
So I made the mistake of judging players by my own standards, the way I trained and the way I played and the way I approached the game.
I want to ask you actually, what was the story behind first the sacking of Terry Howard at halftime during the documentary, and also what's the story behind you offering 2 players out after a less than encouraging performance?
Yeah, that's just to get a reaction. I mean, in Terry Howard's book, one of his mates said, "Well, why didn't someone hit him?" Because that would have been interesting. Believe me, that would have been interesting. It would have been interesting to meet the guy that suggested it. But I had it loads of times, but I think it was cowardly. I actually took bollockings off of a manager, Frank Clark, who then, and Peter Eustace, who then called me in the office, said, put a towel around you, come in the office. Do you want a drop of whiskey? No, I'm fine. You know I don't drink. Well, have a beer. No, I don't. Why am I here? I've brought you in to tell you why I said what I said in there. Because you know, and I know, and the crowd knows, and you're going upstairs to get a man of the match award, knows that you were playing out your skin. But if I dig out players who haven't got your shoulders, your mental toughness or your mental strength, right, I know they're going to crumble. But if they see me unloading on you, they're going to look across and go, if he's having a go at Sits, where does that leave me? And so what I'm doing, I'm helping them make their own minds up. I'm leading them down the path of taking responsibility for their own performances without bollocking them. I said, well, I don't agree. I think it's just cowardly, right? So what I did is, now another time you might get a bollocking when it was justified. Yeah. And what happens with that is they're appealing to your manhood. They're appealing to your pride. They're appealing to your ego, which I did. Now the difference was, I wasn't appealing a lot of the time to men with any ego, any pride, or any manhood. You understand? The Terry Howard thing, he was on the 7, he elected after I begged and pleaded with him and tried to look out for him and advise him that he was coming up, his contract was up for renewal in the summer. So he wanted X amount of pounds rise, he wanted X amount of pounds appearance money, and he wanted a 2-year contract which would have guaranteed a testimonial at the end of the 2 years because it would have completed 10 years service. So he said, with that in mind, I want the board of directors that consisted of 5, Tony Wood, Derek Weinrabe, Vince Marsh, Harry Linney and John Goldsmith, to put in £2,000 each to kickstart my testimonial fund. And I said, I don't think that's going to happen. I can't see it happening. So I was trying to be as subtle as I could. Yeah. Because I loved him, Terry.
Well, you mentioned in the documentary he's good company on a night out with friends, but listen,
no one disliked Terry. No one disliked Terry. But I genuinely, I liked him. I liked him like, I didn't live near him and I weren't close with him socially, but I felt close to him in where it mattered, in the changing room and on the training field when we were both players. You understand? Yeah. I don't have to be out at Charlie Chan's or at the dog track with him to feel close to him. Yeah. But I felt close to him. I met all his family. I got on with his brother-in-law. I got on with his sister. I got on with his mum and dad. I got on with his dad, who was he had a fish wholesale business, and I knew all about him. And it broke me heart, you know, what he was doing to himself and what he was doing to me. Because he betrayed me. In the end, he betrayed me. So I thought, I'm not having it. So I'm going to give you what you've given me. He refused to sign the contract for the same money. And I said, all that matters is you get your testimonial. Yeah. And he went, yeah. So I said, we'll sign for the same money for 2 years and you're there, you're home and dry. But I said, don't expect the directors who can't afford to put in 200, an overnight stay with a coach at the time was 1,100 quid-ish, right? I said, they can't put in 220 quid each to give us an overnight stay. 5 times 220 is 1,100, right? They can't afford to put in 220 each to give us an overnight stay at Stockport. Right? So I said, so don't be banking on £2,000 a pop. Yeah, right? Exactly. It went on and on and on and on and on. And, well, in his book he admits, he said, I was easy enough to get hold of. If you wanted to find me, I'll be at Romford Dogs Monday night, Walthamstow Dogs Tuesday night, Romford Dogs Wednesday night, Walthamstow Dogs Thursday night, Romford Dogs Friday night, Walthamstow Dogs Saturday night, Charlie Chan's Saturday night, maybe Hollywood's Thursday night in Romford, right? And if I felt like it, I'd be at Hackney Wick in Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday afternoon. Now, he goes on about their supporters and he goes on about loyalty and he goes on about them having your career in the palm of their hand and I treated them with disdain and never in a million years did I do that. I'm too profound a human being for that. What I would suggest to any supporter is he living like an athlete, showing due respect to the money that you're bringing through the turnstiles to pay his wages by leading that type of lifestyle? You know what I mean? Make your own mind up. But I tried to protect him. He wouldn't have it. Fair enough. He did what he thought was right. But in the end, he had what could be perceived as insurmountable weight problems. And he got a couple of chasings like you wouldn't believe. And I just thought, you know what? And what was going on behind the scenes was, while directors were passing him in the corridor or the foyer saying, hello Terry, how are you? Yeah, any news on your new contract? In board meetings they were saying, we want him out of the building, get rid of him. Have you had an offer for Terry Howard? Anyone coming for Terry Howard? No one's offered money for Terry Howard? And it was an emphatic no. No one. And Terry goes on in his book about all these phone calls from clubs. Jimmy Quinn at Reading and Martin O'Neill at Wickham and somebody else. Alan Kirbishley, well, why didn't they come in for him? Because he spent all pre-season, he had all the previous season, he spent all pre-season, so you're talking July, August, September, October, November, December, January, February. He had 8 months with me, training and playing, and there wasn't one offer for him. So all this choice of clubs, where were they? Right? If they were that convinced of either their own judgment, or they were that convinced of the judgment of their scouts, or they were that convinced of Terry's ability, then they would have put an offer in for him. He could have gone to 7 days' notice. And the answer to all the above was they didn't. Right? So delusions of grandeur on Terry's part, when I tried to protect him, and I tried to warn him that certain people who were sitting on the board wanted him out of the football club, and he weren't going to get his testimonial, so play them at their own game and sign for the same money. And he wouldn't have it. So he dug his heels in, I dug my heels in, but the difference was I was getting squashed in the middle between Terry's loss of form and his weight problem and the board of directors who wanted him out of the club. So I exploded, and it manifested itself how you saw on camera.
Yeah.
Unfortunately for me.
Speaking of on camera, during your rant at the halftime of the Blackpool match, obviously you wanted the team to overturn the 3-0 deficit.
Blackpool won, it was 1-0.
Oh no, it ended 3-0, didn't it?
No, it ended 1-0.
That was 1-0.
The one you're thinking of is Brentford, Boxing Day.
That's it.
Yeah, we were 3-0 down in 20 minutes.
Yeah. Where did the Graham Taylor reference come from? You got us in this fucking mess. Now you get us out of it.
Just a story that I heard, and then I read a biography or an autobiography, and it was during his time they were getting beat. I think it might have been Crewe.
Yeah, I think you mentioned.
And they were about to get knocked out of the FA Cup by these minnows, like the minnows, however you say it. So he was at Villa. I'm sure he was at Villa, not Watford. I'm sure he was at Villa.
Yeah,
they were about to get knocked out of the FA Cup. And when you've got all these see what happens is what you've got to realise is between the coach and the manager and the group of players, you sign a contract, a verbal contract during the course of the week. You agree on listen. I'm not like someone made a kit man who I got rid of. He made a diabolical, sarcastic comment. Saying that I was still out the game, and as he applied for any jobs, and this certain young player who'd worked under me said, no, I don't think so. And he said, well, he wouldn't have a chance anyway. He said, put it this way, he said, if John and Adolf Hitler both applied for the same job, who do you think would get the job? So I didn't conduct myself like any type of Adolf Hitler, because I always used to, at the end of the training, or even during, I used to throw the floor open. And I used to ask for suggestions from the players or feedback, or is there anything, in particular, because they're the ones that have got to take the field, right? Yeah. And it was never done enough in my career. Is there anything you're not happy with, or is there anything you want to go over again?
Yeah.
Okay. And the odd one or two, maybe Ian Bogey occasionally, Colin West occasionally, Glenn Cockrell occasionally, Paul Hild occasionally were the only ones that spoke up. Maybe Ian Enden, who was supposed to be the captain. But in the end, he just ended up looking after himself and playing for himself.
Would you say football's kind of like that, where players instead of speaking up, they tend to just think, you know what, as long as I'm doing cool, it's a dog eat dog world. I got bigger teeth than you, so I don't care what happens to you. I care about me. I care about number one. Do you think that is symptomatic of the game?
Where'd you go from there? Once you've sorted out winning your 1v1, it's about helping your mate. But I'll be honest with you, if I had people around that with my career, I'd rather be out of football. Because what it is, it's about the greater good. It's about the collective. It's about the team. It's about the club.
Do you think that's been lost in recent years with the skyrocket in money and everyone just wanting to
Quite
live
possibly.
the lifestyle?
Quite possibly. But I can only talk from my own experience, and it was definitely the case there. But the point I make is when you throw the floor open and say, you know, you're asking for feedback, or is there anything you're not happy with? Is there anything you want to go over again? The point I was making, you sign a verbal contract. So you've got pre-agreed patterns of play going forward. You've got pre-agreed set pieces that are going to give you your best chances of scoring a goal, right? Along with your patterns of play and your and the drills that you do in the attacking third, right? Now at Orient, with the players I had, probably our best chance was scoring was from a set piece, right? And you've got a pre-agreed defensive strategy, right? Now, if you're not happy with it, and now's the time to speak up. Now, when I was a player, if anything, I had too much to say, because I was already thinking like a coach. Do you understand? And I'd been accused of being a bit too mouthy at times, at Chelsea in particular, and Leyton Orient. I mean, I threw a wobbly at Gillingham once, playing them in the cup. Frank Clark said, "Oh, shut up, you're a big baby." I said, "No, it's all right, I'll take the blame again, because we got hit on the break."
Yeah.
And Brian Eastick was the coach, and he said about the two fullback linking up to push the wingers on and coming up and joining midfield. And I said, "No, that should only happen on the side of the ball." I said, as he turns out, I said, if he turns out to his right, then the right back's got to come in. I said, but the left back's got to be tucked round, so we keep it 3v2. Anyway, they hit us on the break, and I said, yeah, all right, I'll take the blame again, not Brian, like that. And Clarkey went to me, "Oh, you fucking big baby." And I said, nothing to do. I said, even Liverpool don't leave 2v2 at the back. I said, their centre halves are Hansen and Lawrenson. Do you know what I mean? I rest my case. So, if anything, I was too mouthy, right? But when you throw the floor open and you're asking for feedback, if you're not getting any, you assume that everyone's agreed the verbal contract and everybody's happy.
We've seen you mention on another interview, and also you mentioned here that you were, was it commercial director at Leyton Orient? Or was it market director? Because during the troubled times, during the documentary, you mentioned that you were doing like 6 jobs at once. What kind of jobs did you do?
First team coach, scout, reserve team coach, which me and Chris used to take turns going with Tom, the youth team coach, to take the reserves. The reserves mainly consisted of the youth team because there weren't enough pros. I used to go and coach the youth team that I'd left behind. I used to do afternoon sessions with them because I wanted them to do well, and I wanted them to get a living out of the game, and I felt a bit guilty about leaving them.
You weren't getting 6 paychecks, were you?
No. We come to that if you want.
Were you getting one?
So now we're 5. So then, when the club never had the money for overnight stay, and the company we used stopped sending coaches until we paid in advance.
We saw that on the debate. Wasn't one of the
Angel Motors
up to? Yeah, I was going to say.
So they said the invoices have got to be paid, and from now on, if you want to coach, you pay up front. So I had to ring mates who are in business and become like what you might call interim commercial manager to generate money, just so we could travel to away games. And the other thing, really, I never thought of it, but I was Centre of Excellence Director. I mean, I gave the title to Steve Shorey, and he was getting paid, but I used to go and keep an eye on everything, not because I'm a control freak, but because I enjoyed seeing kids make progress. I enjoyed watching the coaches work. And I started to put things into place with regards to how I was going to restructure the club and give a portfolio to Barry Earn.
Do you think you had enough control over what went on at Leyton Orient at that time in 94, 95?
Your position's always going to be undermined if you haven't got a long-term contract. So I had massive responsibility with no power. Because, players are all, well, how long's he got? And like Turner would have said, his contract ran till the end of the year, but he was on 3 times the money I was on. So that's no one's fault but mine and the directors. And he obviously would have said something to his mate Colin West, and then they would have said something, in the dressing room, and then obviously it comes out that I'm only on a youth team contract until the end of that season. And the longer it went on, and the more we were getting beat, the more precarious my position becomes. You understand? So my credibility was undermined, and at the end of the day, you're always on thin ice. Especially if the players know they've got a longer contract than you.
Speaking of the players, we do have another video question from the G-Man, actually.
During your rants, How do you reckon the players were feeling at the time you were going full throttle, raging, screaming, shouting, swearing, and all the rest? What do you reckon was going through their heads? And if you was managing again, would you take the same approach?
Well, if I was managing again, it depends on the circumstances. I like to think I wouldn't take the same approach. What was going through their head, I scratched the surface earlier. I made the mistake of automatically assuming that people would train and play the way I did and have the same sort of makeup and ingredients that helped me have get a living in the professional game. So you would hope and assume that there was hurting and that their pride was hurt and that you'd question their pride, their integrity, their manhood, their professionalism. And if it was me, I mean, I've seen plenty of players. I'd have reacted. I'd have gone out the first half a dozen tackles in the second half. You know what I mean? There'd have been bodies everywhere. You know what I mean? And you'd straight away you'd lift yourself, lift the crowd, lift the tempo. I was hoping to get some sort of reaction in terms of appealing to their pride as men, but as you saw, there wasn't a lot in there. I don't know.
I mean, I know there's one part in the documentary where you're like, have you not examined the words? Do you not understand how profound the statement is? But what I want to ask next is, did the change in ownership basically wreck any chance you had of keeping Orient up that year?
Yeah.
And were you made any promises by upper management, such as Barry Hearn, when you were in charge?
Yeah, I think the fact that there was 3 regime changes and a possible 4th definitely undermined it. The old regime, listen, at the end of the day, I'm here, I'm breathing, I'm getting a living. What happened to me pales into insignificance, right? Tony Wood, the chairman who was underpinning the club's losses, his main business was in Rwanda, right? And the summer of '94 were when the atrocities between the Tutsis and the Hutus began. And his business was decimated. He'd had a coffee plantation for over 30 years out there, right? So he came back dishevelled, he looked like a big issue seller. He came back a wreck. He had to be taken out via Kigali by United Nations Special Forces, smuggled out. He went back after it calmed down a little bit, and he saw people who'd been in his family. I think he was there for 38 years, and they'd been with him for 30 years, and they were floating, I can't say face down in the pool, because they had their heads cut off and their arms cut off, and there were soldiers drinking bottles of whiskey lying on his bed. So forget what happened to me, right? But I knew that A, there was going to be no financial support, and B, there was going to be no emotional support from Tony Wood, because he was having to deal with what he'd seen.
Yeah, of course.
So, then Phil Wallace came in, and I found him very easygoing. I found him very easy to talk to. I found him very easy to communicate with, and I felt like I could open up to him. But there's no two ways about it. He looked at it and he just said, I can't make these figures work. And I think the figures frightened him off. And Chris Turner said, well, where's it going? He said, look, administration. He said, and ultimately liquidation, he said, because the figures are horror show. Then the third regime, Barry Hearn came in, and I didn't feel as comfortable with him as I did with Phil Wallace. He said that you've got a few rough edges. He said, I like the way you talk straight. You seem like an honest guy. You've got a few rough edges. This is someone who came from a Dagenham council estate, by the way, telling me I've got rough edges.
Pot kettle black, eh?
Yeah. So, or that's where he says he came from. But anyway, you let that wash over you. And he said, I want your retained list, and I want a portfolio on how you want to run and restructure the club. So tying in with results, I think my portfolio frightened the life out of him, because I wanted the scouting network, I wanted rewarded. The youth policy, I wanted rewarded. So I wanted it incentivised for people who brought kids through the ranks, because I'm still convinced to this day that it was the right way to go. Because what they've done at Orient, they're going fantastic at the moment, but it's like a lot of clubs, they start their building with the roof.
Yeah, rather than with the foundations.
They start with the pretty bit that you can see, right? And I think since I left, I might be wrong, anywhere between 4 and 7 players through the youth ranks is not a good return for 20 years. You You know what I mean? It should be a couple, minimum of one a year, or at least two. A minimum of one, maybe two.
Yeah.
So over a 20-year period, you're talking about a big turnover of youth players coming through. Do you know what I mean? Coupled with what they've done, because my exit strategy in terms of a poor youth policy was delving into non-league and getting loans from higher division clubs, which I told him. And what they've done, they've concentrated on that part. So like free transfers and minimum outlay for players from the European Union or from non-league clubs or higher division clubs who've been released. And I think me wanting to incentivise it frightened him off, because he said to me, "You'll be getting a 3-year deal," and I even remember what he was doing. He kept turning around and flicking teletext because the snooker was on, and he wanted to know who was beating who. And he said, "The job's worth 50 grand a year. You'll be getting 35, and the rest will be incentivised." So I said, "Well, I can't ask for any more than that." I said, "All I want is time, and I want a level playing field with regards to getting players in." And he said, "Okay." He said, "But just bear in mind one thing." He said, "If I don't see massive improvement within 18 months, expect to suffer the consequences." I said, "Fair enough." I said, "Consequences of what?" I said, "I'll probably fall on my sword." He said, "Mind you, I might be looking for a port on myself." He said, "If it don't go how I'm hoping it does." But no, I mean, it's credit to him, the clubs in terms of infrastructure has gone from strength to strength. And I hope they've got a training ground now.
You know what, you mentioned in terms of consequences, and we've actually got a question via email from Edward Papaluizu. And he said, a question for John. You said that due to the documentary when you were at Orient, that this led to you not getting any football jobs. And I listened to you in a YouTube video in which you specified that you applied for a job at Charlton. However, due to the perceived image of you, they did not even give you an interview. However, Chris Turner, who was co-manager and had a very successful relative to the club and leagues in which I'd call it relatively successful, period afterwards in which he managed the likes of Hartlepool and Stockport and managed to do well with them. I've watched the Orient documentary, and Chris Turner did his fair share of motivation and hairdryer treatment, albeit not perceived as harshly as you. However, he managed to get over that and become an assistant at Leicester and Wolves, I believe, until he got the job at Hartlepool. So firstly, why do you think Chris Turner got opportunities in the game and not yourself? And secondly, do you still keep in touch with Chris at all? And lastly, I am a Liverpool supporter and I'd appreciate your opinion on Brendan Rodgers and the job he is doing with us. What's he done well and not so well as manager? And that's from Edward Papaluizu.
Yeah.
There's a lot in there. But
yeah, there's a lot in there. Short answer with regards to staying in touch with Chris is no. I haven't stayed in touch with him, he hasn't stayed in touch with me. I think he felt that he was well shot of me because, like most people in football, when I was doing a bit of scouting for Manchester City, I'd walk into a scout's guest room or a boardroom, and when you're looking around to get a cup of tea and see who you know there, you'd automatically see people sort of uncomfortably shuffling away from you, and their heads would go down or they'd turn. And
so they don't want to be guilty by association.
Exactly.
That kind of thing,
and they don't want to be the one, seen as talking to and dealing with the lunatic. Chris got advice, ironically, from someone who I know very well now. Worked in TV for many, many years, and Chris rang him up for his advice on the documentary, and he said, "Look, I don't think it's going very well. Have you got any advice for me?" And the guy's since told me that he advised Chris to stay as much as he could out of camera shot and keep whatever he says to a minimum. So that basically, that dictated the fact that I would have to be the more vocal of the two.
Yeah.
And as you probably see, if you watch it through again, Chris is sort of hovering around on the fringes without getting too involved.
No, definitely.
So it wasn't shed in as bad a light as I was.
Oh no, of course not. Especially with the halftime rant at Brentford. These all you see from Chris Turner is, you've got no fucking heart. And then obviously the focus is on you for like the next 3-4 minutes after that.
Yeah.
So I think that kind of very much,
Well, I knew by then. I mean, I thought Christmas could have been a turning point. We had 9 days rest prior to that game. And what I'd done, I gave the players plenty of time off to do their Christmas shopping, arrange their own social because the club couldn't afford one. I'm not even sure I can't remember whether they got a turkey or a bottle of scotch that year from the club, which is a normal courtesy. We slowly built up to that, going towards the end of the 9 days. I actually, at the start of it, I took them to a health club for, water aerobics and jacuzzis and saunas to help them relax and chill out. Because I thought that could have been the turning point a little bit. But it wasn't to be. And then when you get later on accused of training too long on Christmas Day, which was an hour, I went to the players and I said to the senior pros and the captain, canvass the lads. You can either come in Christmas morning and get it over and done with, and we'll do a run through of what we're going to face versus Brentford.
Yep.
Or we come in and do a little bit Christmas evening. And I said, but we must come in because we're playing on the 26th and the 27th. So they had a quick word and they said, look, a lot of the lads want to be with their kids and their families to open the presents.
Yeah.
Have their Christmas lunch and come in on the night time. Is that all right? So I said, yeah. And we came in and we trained for an hour. I took the warm up, and I'd had an English Christmas dinner is enough, but I had the Greek version, you know what I mean? So that shows you how, animated the warm up was. And we ran through set pieces, we ran through pattern of play. We knew our defensive strategy had been rehearsed the day before, so that was all right. We went through what Brentford would do. Everyone happy? Yeah, we'll have a small-sided game for 15 minutes and then home, shower and home. And then Terry Howard accuses me in his book of training too long. An hour.
I mean, in regards to that, I'll quote you again, too wrong for too long. That was in terms of some of the quotes from the book.
Listen, I mean, as a supposed professional athlete, I mean, I was no, I was no Linford Christie or Usain Bolt, but I used to try and look after myself, and really and truly, if I was a paying supporter and I'd known this was how the players were conducting themselves, I wouldn't be an happy bunny. And yet, for some reason, they loved him. Do you know what I mean? They loved him, but he ended up, he's running around. I said it, I don't know what it was, because I used to weigh him, and it was either £8. He put on £8 in 11 days or £11 in 8 days. He ballooned, and it was how he was living his life. And so with all the other goings on with him, I just thought, you know what? I want you as far away from me as you can get.
It's interesting that you've mentioned Terry Howard's book a couple of times.
Yeah.
Do you think that most have forgotten about the documentary, or do you think that most still hold it against you even after nearly 20 years?
Who supporters?
Anyone?
There's like an infamy about it. I had a guy in the back of the cab, Adrian Durham, picked him up from TalkSport. He said it was entertaining. I said, well, not very entertaining from where I'm sitting because I ended up being treated like a leper.
Yeah.
No, I mean, it basically ruined the rest of my life. If I wanted to let it, if I wasn't a fighter in terms of picking myself up and coming through it with the help of a good woman, because football was my life from the age of 12, professional environment since the age of 14, it's all I knew. It's all I ever wanted. And somehow I've managed to push the self-destruct button. The only thing I can say to you is what I've done pales into insignificance, because you've had overt racism from a guy who won one FA Cup with the biggest club in the world. Ron Atkinson at Man United. He spoke
about the Desai
disgracefully and disgustingly and very flippantly, and I'm a big history buff, and I can defend the British Crown to a degree, and I know who the perpetrators were with the start of the slave trade and where the word came from. And it's a bastardised version of a word that comes from Spanish and Portuguese. But to be that flippant about it and accuse someone who's been a World Cup winner and a European Championship winner with France, and he's won the European Cup and Serie A with AC Milan, he's won a double with Chelsea, and when he was in the press room at Arsenal, when I still worked there for the Press Association, the reporter's concerns stopped just short of administering man love or oral sex, because the geezer was like who he was. And I thought to whether the headphones are on or off, to start coming out with that filth.
Because that's kind of in you. That's kind of in you, no matter who you've given opportunities.
Yeah, and then you had the bullshit documentary afterwards when he's walking around the pitch with Brendan Batson. I've got the 3 degrees in my team, Brendan and Laurie Cunningham and Cyril. You know what I mean? Well, and you're thinking, you know, who are you? You played. Who do you play? Well, Cambridge City or Oxford City or fucking non-league? I mean, you're a nobody. Do you know what I mean? And he went and what he done. He sold an image. He sold an image, and through spill, he built the image up, and a few cases of champagne with his media mates, and that grows. But when you look down at it, you know, you just think, in terms of achievement, coupled with what you said, how can that be forgiven and forgotten? You've had bung scandals. I can give you a list as long as your arm. People who have been involved in bung scandals in football. That was very quickly glossed over. You've had alcoholism, gambling addiction, and cocaine abuse.
Yep.
In the case of one player, all 3, who I wouldn't have in charge of me housekeeping, but he ran a football club for 3 seasons. You've had curb crawling, which was swept under the carpet, and after one issue of the Sunday People or the News of the World, even though he was caught 3 times, that was forgiven and forgotten. And you've had the worst one of all, as a man with 2 daughters, underage sex. And the guy served 6 months, and he addresses the media. We all make mistakes, and he's had 4 good jobs since, even though he has to sign the sex offenders register for the rest of his life. I mean, what I did really is think, but what it proves is if your face fits, you can be forgiven curb crawling, bung scandals, underage sex, racism, and substance abuse. You know what I mean? So, and what people don't like is they don't like it when someone like me stands up for themselves and points the finger back. Yeah. So that just makes you even more. So what they do is they get together with their pals and you've got it coming from all directions. He's the lunatic, not the one who's done the cocaine or the curb crawling. I'm the lunatic.
Do you think the media has a negative influence on football? Because I personally on pitch talk shows on many occasions I've said I call them the parasitic media, because it's just a lot of parasites.
You know the saying, the pen's mightier than the sword, and I think in this country we build people up to knock them down again. It's happened through generations. It's happened with Peter Osgood. You can't tell me Jeff Astle was anywhere near the class of Peter Osgood, and yet he got on against Brazil and Aussie never, even though he travelled to Mexico. You couldn't put a price on what Peter Osgood will be worth now. Probably the ultimate centre forward. Aerial ability, immaculate first touch with body or both feet, passing ability, dribbling ability, scoring ability, and he could be nasty if he wanted to as well. Look after himself. They've done it with Gascoigne, they've done it with Alan Hudson, they've done it with Oddle when he was the manager, they've done it with Venables when he was the manager. The geezer who dragged the name through the mud, he got off lightly. 3 or 4 mistresses, and he touted himself for 4 jobs while he was England manager. That England blazer should be the be-all and end-all while you're in that job. You understand? You shouldn't be touting yourself around for club jobs while you've got the 3 lines there.
Yeah, I think it should be the be-all and end-all as a player as well, to be honest.
In terms of the media, they've got a lot of power really, and it's what I said. In some cases, it's your worst nightmare because it's a supporter with a typewriter or a computer or a pen.
Another question that I wanted to ask you actually. After you left Leyton Orient back in '95, it is said that you battled depression. We've discussed at length on shows the issue of depression, and we'd like to ask, first and foremost, is that true? And secondly, if it is true, how serious about depression was it? And thirdly, what advice would you give to anyone battling depression?
Well, A, yeah, it was true. B, I didn't realise it. But what happens, it manifests itself physically as well, because you're drained of all your strength. I didn't want to get out of bed. If I got out of bed and went downstairs, I looked like mad, like a scarecrow, hair all over the place, barely shuffled to the thing to make a cup of tea. Then I'd go from there to lounging about on the settee because I had nothing to get up for.
Yeah.
As much as I tried to get a job, I had no other qualifications. And to be honest with you, I pulled myself out of it with my wife. I pulled myself out of it because I looked at my 3 little kids. At the time they were 7, 5 and 3. We had 3 and 4 years. And I just thought to myself, you know, no one's going to help us. No one's going to help us. I can only help myself. So I just took on the same attitude I had as a player. I didn't bring anybody for help. Some other people saw it, and my father-in-law saw it. He said to my mother-in-law, we'd get him to come and stay with us for a little while. But I said, nah. I had no support network because my mum and dad were gone. Well, my mum had died and my dad had gone with a new woman, a different woman, another woman. And he was out in the sticks somewhere. My brother was causing problems for me. My sister I never really had a relationship with because she looked at me more as being like a father that we never had. So the relationship wasn't brother-sister, it was more, you know, like second father to a daughter really, and all I ever tried to do was look out for her, protect her from herself.
As you do as a brother, yeah.
But I never had no support network really, that's the bottom line. You know, my brother-in-law used to rally round me and try and help me, and in the end, I pulled myself out of it. I spoke to a few people, and I got myself out of it. And then a little chink of light, did a few FA courses, got a little coaching job at Enfield, got a job in a private school as a PE teacher. So I started to juggle 2 or 3 balls, but the main thing was making my own decision.
Yeah.
To snap out of it and never want that feeling again of feeling or being useless with no aftercare from football, which was like, you know, your playing career's over, your coaching career's over, your management career's over, no one to come near you or touch you, no one's picked the phone up to you. And I'm not one to be, I was never what you might call busy. Mm-hmm. You know, we used to nickname me, oh, he's busy, you know what I mean, he's always on the, putting himself about. I was never one to be busy. I had a couple of mates that I was quite close with, like Neil Banfield, who's at Arsenal, and I hope he goes on to really. He's been there for years now. He was one of the few people who invited me to a game, and he got a funny look in the. This was at the old Highbury. Yeah. I didn't need anything to be said. No words needed to be spoken. He got a funny look from a couple of the Arsenal hierarchy, and again it was guilty by association. So the invitations stopped coming.
Bit of word association, bit of fun. So when I'm rattling these off, just want the first word that comes.
So it's like Actor Studio.
Just want the first word that comes to mind. The FA.
Shambles.
I agree with you on that one. FIFA.
I'm only allowed one word, yeah? Because I was going to say bigger shambles.
What about UEFA?
Medium shambles. So they're the in-betweenies, aren't they? It's all political nonsense, isn't it?
Youth.
Wasted.
Football.
Trouble.
Greg Dyke.
You can't say that in a word, really. No, I mean, what it is, you know, he's you know, because of his age, with a bit of luck, he might come in and ruffle a few feathers.
That Joey Barton. Speaking of ruffling feathers, Joey Barton.
Kindred spirit.
I can kind of see that actually.
He's more to him. I think there's a lot more. I don't know the geezer. Never
He's
met
done a
him.
philosophy degree.
I don't know the geezer from Adam. I'll tell you
what.
what. I've always thought there's a dark side. Obviously, that's an obvious thing to say. But I've always thought, you know what? There's an edge to a lot of people with talent, and I've always thought there's another side to him.
I hear that. Clark Carlisle.
Politician.
Leyton Orient.
History.
Chelsea.
Glamorous.
Grassroots.
Grassroots. Well, I was gonna say it needs to be addressed, but it's a lot more than one word, isn't it? It needs to be addressed. Yeah.
David Bernstein.
Typical.
Roman Abramovich.
Benefactor.
Manager.
Manager. Depends.
Isn't that making nappies? No, I'm kidding. Sorry. Coach.
Versatile.
Wages.
Astronomical.
That's exactly the word on my mind as well. John Terry.
Need help.
Anton Ferdinand.
In Turkey.
I was expecting the word Bunsen burner after one of your quotes.
Yeah.
Rio Ferdinand.
Shame.
Steven Gerrard.
Great captain.
Frank Lampard.
Great servant.
England.
Hope.
Spain.
Reality.
Premier League.
Premier League. Prostitutes.
Ray Wilkins.
Gentlemen.
Club for a fiver.
Interpretation.
I like that. I'm going to throw in a random one. Milk bill.
Milk bill. Lend us a tenner.
I love it. State of the Game is our next segment. From Samir Sawney via Facebook. Big shout out to Motivate SF, by the way. What do you think of the modern era of football in 2013 compared to your era? What is better or worse in your view?
I think the pendulum swung too far the other way in terms of what used to happen before. The clubs had all the power and the players very little or none. And now the players seem to have all the power and the clubs very little or none. As a consequence, both too extreme in the respect that contract wasn't worth the paper it was written on. The players are bigger, quicker, faster, more powerful, and probably collectively more ability than the players in my era or the era before, because even I think the era before it was one up, I've said it, I think it was one up from park football. In the 40s post-war, 50s, early 60s, it was one up from park football and very pedestrian. And then it went on again in the 70s. You know, you had obvious exceptions. I mean, he's the best player I ever saw, Best. George Best was the best player ever in the world. because just absolutely everything. There's nothing he couldn't do, and you could always see little bits and pieces missing in other people's games. So there's certain ones you could pick out, big names, obvious names. But latter day, I just think collectively there's more. The game's got more going for it on the field, and it's a lot of the coaching and methods have been a breath of fresh air. It's different systems played, and playing training habits. All the come to the country from abroad, and we seem more open and more open-minded, and we seem more receptive to taking on board these ideas, and I think it's been for the betterment of the game. The only thing I'd say is I think we signed, I agree with Martin O'Neill said the same once. He said, I've got no problem paying top money for top players. What I've got a problem is paying top money for average players. So what happens is you might get an average foreigner who's cheap compared to his British counterpart. And it's stopping the kids coming through underneath. And before they used to delve into the lower leagues. So the money was kept within the confines of the football pyramid in this country, in the UK specifically. Now, you asked about some of the wrongs, up until recently, I think the start of the third quarter of this year, 80 million in agents' fees have gone out of this country and disappeared to Christ knows where, you know what I mean? Who knows? A bank vault in Russia or the Cayman Islands or the Bahamas, who knows where it's gone. But it's not in this country where it should be.
Speaking, it's quite interesting you mentioned about money going out to other countries. A question from the G-Man, our co-host. What's your views on foreign ownership in the English game, and do you think it was fair on the Cardiff fans to have their whole club rebranded in the way that it was as soon as it was taken over by Vincent Tan and that consortium?
Yeah, I mean the club is it always has been. I'm sorry it sounds like a little England, or someone said that we were a nation of corner shop owners, but it was always the community. It was always central to the community. It was all helped form the tribalism that goes on. Foreign ownership's a good thing as long as the money's spent in the right way, and I don't think all of it is. Okay, so any positives are normally cancelled out by bad decisions.
Yeah.
Turn them into negatives. And then you've got to ask the question, what happens if the foreign owner gets bored and throws his toys out the pram? You've only got to look at the state of Portsmouth. That was used to make money and siphon money off. And you've only got to look at the state of it now. Or like someone who's coming they're in the autumn or winter of their life, and their offspring might not be interested in football. Mansour's family might not want Man City. Abramovich's kid might not want anything to do with Chelsea. So then what happens? So when there are benefactors, the money's got to be spent in the right way, so that there's like a dynasty created in terms of like producing players, and top draw facilities are kept in place. The rebranding side of it, I suppose that's nothing more than a commercial exercise. So, if anyone's got a blue Cardiff shirt from 1965, it wouldn't have been no different to the one in 1985 to the one in 2013. So he's gone, right, get rid of all the blue and they're red. So everyone's got to buy one. So that tells me it's no more than a commercial exercise. Plus, I think it's something to do with his culture about it being a lucky colour. Yeah,
the red, the dragons and that. Yeah, I mean, it is a shame though when they kind of obliterate over 100 years of history just on a commercial whim. And especially with Pompey, it's even more of a shame, in my view, and I've said on many a pitch talk show, it's a shame that Pompey at one point were being passed around more than chlamydia at a teenage party. Yeah. It was embarrassing. It was like, firstly, I've always wondered how to get the paperwork through that quickly to have that many owners. Yeah. And secondly, how is no one failing a fit and proper persons test?
Yeah, the due diligence wasn't very good, was it?
How was that?
Consequently, I could see more clubs ending up like that, which is right. ending up in fans' trust.
Do you think more clubs should be made examples of? Because I believe, and I've said before, I love Liverpool to death, but the fact of the matter is we should have been made an example of after how close to the brink we got with Gittin Tit, aka Gillette and Hicks.
Yeah.
So do you think more clubs need to be made an example of it?
I think it's too much money involved. The turnover involved with regards to the TV and even through the turnstiles, there's too many vested interests. You know what I mean? Players' salaries, agents' salaries, fees. There's too many vested interests for anyone to be, especially at Premiership level. It never happened. It's tantamount to government. It'd never be exposed. The real skullduggery or what goes on, you know, and the amount of money wasted. That's the most important thing. I mean, just what I see, you know, director of football, director of coaching, director of something else, director of transfers. Then you've got like psychologist, fitness trainer, physiology and anatomy, dietitian. What I was saying the other night, visualisation coach. I mean, what's a load of bollocks? Visualisation coach. It's nothing to do. You can't visualise anything on a football field, and you can't. The only person who can improve your game is you and the coach. The only person who can improve your confidence is you. The only person who can play well is you. You know what I mean? I've never seen a visualisation coach do pre-season. You know what I mean? I tell you what, Mr. Visualisation, come do pre-season for me, and I'll just start the season. You know what I mean? It don't work like that. It does not work like that.
I hear that.
But they somehow took their way through the door. Me personally, I just think you're giving players another reason to foul. You're giving them another emotional crutch and another excuse to foul. That's just my own personal opinion on it.
From Corey Henry via email, who would you class as the most promising young England player right now?
You know, everyone says Wilshere, which to be fair, but he seems to me like he's getting injuries for fun, and even that's down to the clubs and how he's managed, because the last person this happened to was Michael Owen.
Yeah,
he was used too much. There was too much. He was relied upon too much at too young an age. You understand? Owen burst on the scene at Liverpool 16 years of age, and he was England international at 18. Same's happened with Wilshere, and Owen's hamstring was pinging for fun. And Wilshere's had problems with, mainly his ankles, I think. I like him. I like the boy Sterling at Liverpool. I like Raheem Sterling. I like Sturridge. I think they'd be. I mean, I don't know if you still class Sturridge as a youngster, but
25. So
particularly in terms of his form this year. But I like Sterling. I think he should be nailed on to go there as a wild card. But then the other obvious ones to say would be probably Wilshere. And for his pace, Oxlade-Chamberlain.
I hear that. At least Oxlade-Chamberlain have more right than Walcott to go to a World Cup. But I know my theory as to why Walcott went to the World Cup, and that's because David Dean had stroke at the FA. But it's a completely different story. Another question from Corey Henry via email. What's your views on video technology? Was the introduction of goal line technology needed? If yes, is there another part of the game that could make use of the technology?
Paramount. It was absolutely paramount that it came in. The only other area I'd like to see technology used would be like retrospective punishments. You know, for
so like Sasha Rita, for instance, about with him stamping on Adnan Januzaj over the weekend.
Yeah, or that could, for the sake of like 30 seconds. I mean, when you look at the reviews that they have in cricket, they look at the reviews in American football. There's no reason why it couldn't be used. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? Maximum of 2 or 3. I don't know. I mean, some of them, the games end up 96, 97 minutes long. So how much more interference is it going to? I don't envisage there being a lot of interference or stoppages than there already are. Or any more than there already are.
What are your views on diving? Do you see it as a tactical part of the game, and would playing for a foul be something that you'd endorse your players to do if you were managing now, or would you just prefer they tried to stay on their feet?
I prefer. I'm really a little bit old-fashioned like that, but that's just me. I don't think any player should pass up, the possibility of getting a shot in on target when they're in and around the 18-yard box, and as a consequence, a goal-scoring opportunity. I don't think I'd ever condone diving. And in answer to the question, it has become a tactic. It's undoubtedly for years now, but I don't agree with it, to be honest.
From Junior Overu via email, how does John perceive the parity of the Football League and Premier League gap progressing over the next 5 years, and what impact will this have on lower league clubs?
It's gonna get worse. I think there's a massive disparity. The main protagonists were the big six. I think led by David Dean when he was at Arsenal, and he's disappeared and faded into the background, forming the breakaway division. And the disparity is going to be, I think it's only going to get worse. The problem we got is, one of the problems we got is they don't dip into the lower leagues as much as they used to for their players. So, you know, the money that used to be used to underpin any losses at a club to produce a youngster, it's not happening anymore. So I think it's only going to get worse. So as a consequence, I think it's going to end up ultimately regionalised. I could see a top two divisions, like a Premiership and a Championship. Then under that, I could see it probably, which to be fair, I would endorse it. I would have it. I would have another 3 divisions, but they'd be regionalised. You know, like you'd row in like that, the higher echelon of maybe, I don't know what the league is now, but what used to be the conference.
The Skrill Premier now, I think it's called.
So maybe row them in and then regionalise it. So what you do, the money you'd save on travelling and other unnecessary outgoings could then be put into youth policies. You know what I mean? Invest more in the kids instead of spending it on coaches and hotels. Everything will be more or less local. Maybe more local derbies, create more interest. You know, and I'm pretty sure you come up with competition-wise with regards to the divisions. You know what I mean? To make playoffs a little bit sexy.
You're a fan of sexy football.
John Sitton. I'm now a licensed London taxi driver. Latin. I haven't really got one current. I've got to be me, Sammy Davis Jr. Anything my wife cooks. At home. John Lewis's. Trainers. The Last Samurai. The Sopranos. Steve Wright. The Rat Pack, but I love the women as well, like the Aretha Franklin and Barbra Streisand in particular. George Best. Anyone who picks me. When I look at it, really, I suppose the people I most admire were my mum and her dad, my granddad. It's not who, it's what, really. Survival. Survivor. I'm a survivor.
The future and other disciplines is the last segment. You're a licensed black taxi driver, aren't you?
Yeah.
Tell us a bit about it, man. How did you get into that?
I didn't want to be unemployed. I had to make a decision in the mid-30s after what happened with the football. Felt totally ostracised. And then you're looking at what I did, the mistakes I made. I walked out on, I sat 10 mock O-levels as a kid, passed 8. They said even if he brushes up on the other 2, he's got a good chance. But with 8, I could have stayed on and take 2 or 3 A-levels. And in those days, we're talking 70s, we're going to recommend him to university.
Oh, right? Cool.
Which wouldn't have cost me. So I says to my mum, because I thought I was the man of the house, I'm not interested.
Oh, okay.
I'm going to be a footballer. So then you get, you know, that sense of realisation that, hold on, all I've ever known is football, I've got nothing behind me.
Yeah.
What do I do now? So then I looked around and I thought, well, I've got various different mates who do different things, and they've all done well for themselves. And I thought to myself, I wanted to be different. You know what I mean? They've done well with themselves out of building or car franchises or whatever. Do you know what I mean? Property. And I just thought, you know what, I'm going to give it a go. I'm going to register. And then I went through the process. It took me 5.5 years. I was juggling 3 part-time jobs, still trying to be a husband and a decent father. Had to pay the bills. And I think up the carriage office, I was known at the old carriage office, and I think when I went a documentary, even that had an adverse impact, adverse effect.
Even so Orient Club for a Fiver even had an adverse effect on you
was an
getting
examiner.
work.
I ain't going to name him, but an examiner was giving out. What you do, you apply, and they send you back of this is how it happened then. I don't know what happens now, but you apply, and then what happens is they send you say, we'll consider your application following full medical at your own expense. So you send that return of post lively, then they send you another letter saying we need you to fill in this form of disclosure, which is all about you and traces you back to your grandparents. And you're checked at the Criminal Records Bureau up in Liverpool and Scotland Yard in London. Then you're invited up for a talk, and then at that talk you're given what they call a pink slip. Well, that's what it was called then. It had this date stamped on it, and you basically had 2 years to complete all the subject matter and apply for your first exam. And there's a 5-stage examination process. Well, as he was giving me the pink slip, he went, I recognise you, he said. He went, that documentary didn't do you any favours, did it? I thought, you know what I mean? Even here, I'm being... but anyway, no, I mean, I pleased the person in the back. I asked them if they want to go a specific route. If not, leave it to me. Sit back and relax. We have a bit of chat. Politics, current affairs, if they want to talk. Sometimes I don't want to talk, I just want to listen to the radio. If they want to talk, I talk. If they don't want to talk, I won't talk. We talk about their evening or their day. We talk about history, we talk about politics, we talk about obviously football. I've been recognised a few times, and we have a little bit of banter, and then that's it. They settle up, they get their receipt, and we move on to the next one.
So you'd say you're enjoying it then?
By and large, yeah. By and large, because it's like anything in life. You get out of it what you put into it. It's hard work. Some days are more mundane than others. Some days are longer than others, or they seem longer because the gaps between the jobs are too long. But, you know, I've worked hard to get myself in a position where I can get out of bed every day and go to work, get a job. I earned that right. I earned that right the hard way. The subject matter in the exam process was a lot harder then than it was because Livingston changes leaning towards positive discrimination, which is patronising anyway. Changed it. But no, by and large, I've got to say there's more good days than bad days.
How long did it take you to get qualified in that field, and did you find it difficult at first having to learn so much?
You've got to learn how to learn. You have to learn how to learn.
I hear that.
So I signed on August 97 and I passed out Valentine's Day 2003. And the reason Valentine's Day is significant because it's the day I left Chelsea and I signed for Millwall, Valentine's Day 1980. So it's got an added significance, you know what I mean? And I passed out on Valentine's Day 2003, that was my first day on the job. Yeah.
Do you find that you mentioned people getting into your cab and recognising you?
Some do.
On a general basis, those who do recognise you, do you think it's for the wrong reasons, or do you think they recognise you because of the player you were, or is it all solely to do with the document?
I've had a couple who have remembered me as a player, and one guy he done a bit in the programme. I was in his all-time Leyton Orient best 11, which was nice to be appreciated. Another one remembered me as a kid at Chelsea, and he said, "Yeah, I remember." He said, "There was bad times." I said, "Yeah, you know, I mean, I don't know what it is, whether I'm a Jonah or what, you know, but I remember the new East Stand ran over budget, and I remember they had oil drums chained to the concourse, asking supporters to put coins in to stop the club from going into administration because the East Stand ran so far over budget." You know, so it was difficult times for the club then. But you get a bit of both. You get some they reckon, and then we have a bit of a chat about the documentary, and then I tell them my side and put them straight.
Yeah.
You know, but they go, that was unbelievable. And I said, yeah. And they go, really? Is that what happened? I said, yeah, that's what happened. And then, you know, maybe have a little bit chuckle about it, but other than that, it's not resurrected in a negative way, really. People are good to me.
I want to ask you, in terms of the documentary as well, obviously we connected via Twitter, and but have you found using the social networks, how have you found using the social networks such as Twitter, and do people still bring up the documentary?
Yeah, I mean, they're interested to know what went on behind the scenes, which is why the book is coming out.
Yep, which we're going to get into.
So, you know, I've got to say 90% more, 95, 97, 98% is any interaction I have has been positive on Twitter. And, you know, it's like, it reflects society really. I think, you know, 99 times out of 100 is people get in the back of the cab, they're good as gold. You know, it's like Werner said, where's that phrase come from? But it's just once in a blue moon pancake day, I say, you know what I mean? So it could be a leap year blue moon pancake day. You get one numbskull who gets in, he's had a bad day or a bad week or a row with a wife, they try and take it out on you, do you know what I mean?
Yeah. You said in another interview that you'd love to open a sports academies focusing on the martial arts and the football academy.
Yeah.
You still want to do it?
Oh, I need to win the Euro lottery, don't I?
But in terms of it being something
forget me. Once upon a time, probably one of the most humbling experiences I've ever had was going back to martial arts. But then the plus side is you're working for yourself. You're working on your own. Yeah. I'm 54. I was 54 on October the 21st, so a couple of weeks ago, 2 Mondays ago tonight. And I started as a 13-year-old with, I knew him as Uncle Jim, but it basically, him and his wife were my mum and dad's best friends, Jimmy Burns, and he christened my brother. He was my brother's godfather. And no one knew what it was then, right? And you're going back to, so what, you're going back to 1972. So really very few people knew or had heard of jiu-jitsu or judo, okay? Which I can explain the history, but I won't bore you with it. But the initial martial art, the forerunner was jiu-jitsu, because it was basically everything. And then you had 5 original masters who broke off to form and perfect their each individual art within jiu-jitsu, which was like one who was Kano, who broke off and did judo, which is like the groundwork, the throws, and the strangles and the chokes and the locks. And then you had another one who Shiba broke off and did Aikido, wrist throws, arm locks, shoulder throws, etc. And then you had the way of the sword, Aido, and then you had karate. And they basically, you know, what formed jiu-jitsu. I started it as a 13-year-old under Jimmy Burns. No one knew what it was. It was just like, what, you know, because everyone was into Bruce Lee and Kung Fu.
Yeah.
And we did our own thing. So basically you had the blocks and the punches and the kicks of karate, you had the weapons, you had, which is the level I got to. I started to learn the cuts with the sword and the ceremonial part. Like I say, you had the throws and the chokes and the strangles and the groundwork of judo. And then you had the wrist throws, the wrist locks, the arm throws, the arm locks, the shoulder locks of Aikido, which is what Segal does. Segal does a thing called Aikijitsu, which is like basically concentrates on, you know, the wrists and the elbows and the shoulders. But Jimmy, who christened me brother, he had us doing it for a couple of years. So then you have to make a decision. Now I was getting all these representative honours in football and all these clubs were hovering around me. So do you get up at 6 o'clock in the morning to go to a sports centre somewhere on the south coast?
Yeah.
And if you fight well all day, you get a little cup and a polite round of applause. Or do you do something that you're going to get a living out of?
Yeah.
So I chose football. But for me personally, one of the original points I was going to make for a long time, it was compulsory in schools in Japan. As part of the curriculum, because it's one of the most humbling experiences you could have, which is bowing to superior knowledge.
Yeah. So there's a respect for natural respect.
So you've got the natural respect for that. Then when you intermingle, there's an expression whereby you basically empty your cup of what you know to fill it up with what somebody else knows.
Okay,
and then you've got the main thing, which is my teacher used to say to me, your biggest enemy is complacency. Because sometimes I used to, I was always concentrating, but maybe I'd showboat a little bit.
Yeah.
And you could end up on your back staring at the ceiling, and you've been thrown by a 5'5" woman weighing 12 stone. So that can be a pretty humbling experience.
Yeah.
You understand? And
do you think it'd be good in the curriculum over here then? Do you think it'd work?
Listen,
do you think it'd work over here, or is it just the Japanese culture is more ingratiating to it?
Honestly believe, right, sport is one of the lifebloods of society, any sport. And I just think we don't pay enough attention to sport. I've trained with a lot of people. The Russians are out there. They're hard as nails, crackerjacks, right? They're really tough boys. And they pride themselves on it as well. I've trained with Americans, I've trained with French, I've trained with Canadians. The Canadians are very tough, disciplined boys and girls. And I've trained with some good exponents from the UK. You understand? But the point I make is this, right? Anything that can help in terms of promoting the lifeblood, so any sport is like, I think it's one of the main arteries in society, and if it's got an added thing with regards to keeping someone on the straight and narrow, showing them a bit of respect, a bit of humility, a bit of discipline, and maybe leading them somewhere down the road where they could get an Olympic medal. It's got to be a plus, all pluses. Do you know what I mean? But I think any sport can serve as a positive distraction. And I think we've lost our way. I think we've lost our way in this country. What I said earlier, a lot earlier, about the closure of youth clubs, and I've said it on other interviews, with regards to green spaces and all that. We've lost our way. And you've only got to look at, the last Olympics was good, but you can always be better. You look at all the major sporting countries, sport is like, it's as if their life depends on it. You know what I mean? You're Chinese, you're Americans, you're Russians, you're Australians, you're New Zealanders in the pool, you're Aussies in the pool. You know what I mean? And you look at the others with track and field and gymnastics, they're out there. You know what I mean? And I think that's the level we could especially when supposedly I think we've been demoted. We're only the 6th or 7th wealthiest country in the world. So what's that about?
There's still a lot of wealth.
Exactly, that's my point. That's my point.
There's still a lot. Speaking of the future, and someone else that obviously you're very close with. How did you meet Vernon Grant of Word of Sport / VG Tips? How did you meet him? Because you mentioned earlier that you were into the horses and the dogs and that. Was that how you met him? Or?
No, I'm not on about them kind of horses and dogs. I'm on about them just being sort of the most noble servants.
Okay.
Of God's animals. You know what I mean? I love them to admire them. I don't back them.
Okay.
No, it was a pure fluke. It was someone made me aware of an interview that Chris Turner done with this guy, and I just said something about it, and he remarked about being over here, and then we met up, and that was it. He said, "Do you mind if I do an interview with you?" So I said, "No." So we did it.
Yeah.
And then it sort of the first one, up until very recently, I ain't looked for ages. I'm talking weeks, a matter of weeks now. It had like 38,000 viewings. So it's not bad for someone who's
not at all.
Relatively unknown. You know what I mean? Just a lower division player who drives a cab. So the feedback was pretty good, pretty positive, and it's just gone on from there really. And it was intimated about the book, and I said, I'd love to have a crack at it. I said, it's something I've always wanted to do.
I was going to ask you actually. You've got an autobiography that's being ghostwritten by Vernon Grant of VG Tips / Word of Sport. Can you tell us about what we can expect from it and where we can get it as well?
Well, that website you just read out, it can be ordered on now. It can only be ordered online, and every word I'm quoting via Skype, and he's making notes from it. and it's being written that way. So everything in there is factual. It happened. It really did happen. And I've relayed like different stories from all the different clubs, and a bit of the coaching thing that you know about and the managerial thing that you know about. And like I say, it can be ordered online. What you can expect really is basically the truth, the old truth, nothing but the truth. With regards to what went on behind the scenes at Leyton Orient.
Yeah.
Caused me to feel like the walls, the floor, the ceiling were closing in on me. And when people talk about pressure, probably one of the closing paragraphs in the book would be, I don't care who it is, any name you care to name who's been in football, the amount of pressure that I was actually, I put myself under. Because now I'd sit back, I'd go, okay, you know, if there's no coach to Stockport, we'll get fined the 30 grand and deducted the points, and that's it, not my problem. But I was going, oh, we've got to get a coach, we can't not fulfil the fixture, how's that going to look? You know, I was just desperate to do well for myself and for the club. But yeah, when it comes out, hopefully people enjoy it. There's some funny stories in there, hopefully they'll enjoy them. And, you know, but in the main, it just outlines me background that I came from, my experiences at the 4 football clubs I played for, and what went on the TV.
I hear that. Anyone else you'd like to give a shout out to, apart from obviously Vernon Grant of VG Tips and Word of Sport?
Not really, nah. I'm a private man. I just hope, like anybody out there, I mean, if there's an ounce of curiosity, you know, I'd appeal to just to see how it was way back when. If anyone like who supported Chelsea, Millwall, Gillingham, Leyton Orient, if there's an ounce of curiosity, or any football fan who likes to compare how it was to how it is, and get the background to it, you know, I'd appeal to them to buy it. And I've already pledged that, you know, as long as I can get a living, I can draw a breath, I'll go out and drive the cab. My half is going to go to different charities. Vernon's half, he's earned it listening to me for days on end, you know what I mean? But I'll be carving mine up. I'll give to charity anyway, but I've bought up, paid for numerous pups to be trained, guide dogs for the blind. I've got a big thing for cancer research in memory of my mum and my granddad, and the NSPCC and Help the Aged. The two extremes in the circle of life. Yeah, and I think stuff. In this country we don't do enough for either.
Yeah, no, I hear it. What legacy would you like to leave on football and the world?
I ain't going to leave a legacy on football because I never ended up as fulfilling my ambitions and becoming a big enough name. In terms of the bigger picture, you know, in the end, it sounds a bit negative and a bit nasty, but really, in the end, the only ones that you matter to and that matter to you are the ones closest to you. So hopefully, you know, I've got 3 good kids. I'm still not sure whether they've turned out as well as they have because of me or in spite of me. You know what I mean? But you know, if that's my legacy, then I'll be honest with you, I'm happy because they're 3 great human beings, and I'm well pleased. And you just like to be remembered as a good, strong man for your wife and your kids and for your family. Do you know what I mean? Which I think I have been. Football wise, it was unfulfilled ambitions, shall we say? You know, it wasn't the right conclusion. It wasn't. It didn't draw. I didn't draw the conclusion or reach the conclusion I wanted to with football. But that's the way it goes.
Speaking of a conclusion, any last words of wisdom?
I'd say never go to bed and leave the sink full of washing up. And don't get in the bath with your socks on. Now, listen, everyone, I've come, listen, I'm older now, I'm more mature now, well, except for that. You know, you learn to take people as they are, and I just think like people misread me. And, you know, I just, at the end of the day, really, you just got to make sure that I should have you learned to take advice. I was always struggled to take advice. I was told to keep my head down and I never. Do you know what I mean? So I'd say always have an open mind and learn to take advice. But ultimately, when it comes down to it, just always be yourself. Do you know what I mean? Unfortunately, me being myself upset a few people. But anyway, what can you do? We are what we are.
You know what? You can't please all the people all the time.
Yeah.
But John, I'd like to say,
No worries.
it's been an absolute pleasure.
No worries.
It's been an absolute
That's
pleasure
right.
sitting with you
Yeah.
tonight.
Maybe I'll see you in the new year.
Definitely. We'll make a date of it. And you know what? On behalf of myself, Straight Shooting LJA, the G-Man, and Jazzy Fizzle, it's been another very interesting instalment of Pitch Talk Meets with our guest, Mr. John Sitton. You know what? Remember, facebook.com/Pitch Talk. Become a fan, become a friend, become a member of the group. Join the footballing revolution. We're working so hard to create. Twitter, follow us. Tweet with us, follow us, see what we're up to at Pitch Talk. YouTube.com/Pitch Talk for all the videos. And remember, every Monday on YouTube, it's Pitch Talk Live. But you know what? From myself, Straight Shooting LJA, on behalf of my other two co-hosts, thanks for joining us for another instalment of Pitch Talk Meets.